Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, we have quorum. I call this meeting back to order. And just before we move on, as I mentioned this morning, this is our last meeting of the term. And with that, I would like to thank our clerks here, Brad and Rosemary, our staff at the back here that look after each and every day we're here. Just like to welcome all their great work they've done for us over the last term and thank them. So thank you guys. You guys are awesome. Okay, moving right around, Councillor Palacio. I'm going to go to quick. In writing? In writing? Okay, Councillor Palazzo, EY 32.20. You had a motion, we held that down. If you just hang on, bear with me. You're very welcome. Okay, so request for director report, 900 to 980 Lansdowne Avenue, 30 Powerhouse Street, official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment. You have a motion, is now prepared. We held that down. So the floor is yours.
I'd like to move the recommendations for, are we dealing with the powerhouse?
Yes.
Okay, the city's recommendations.
2-0.
Yeah. And not 2-0, that's, I have a couple of recommendations, and I did speak to city staff, and we're ready to go.
Okay. You good? Staff are okay with this? Councilor Palacio?
Yeah.
They're nodding their head? Yeah. That was not a head, but it was yes. So, motion's on the screen. All in favor? Opposed, carried. Clause amended. All in favor?
Thank you.
Opposed, carried. Okay, EY 32.24, alteration to a designated heritage property and authority to amend a heritage easement, 30 Powerhouse Street. We have a speaker, David Eckler. He was here.
Not anymore.
Is he going to, have you talked to him?
Yeah.
He's not going to speak? Any further speakers to the item? 32.24. Seeing none, Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to move the recommendations from city staff, and a huge thanks to city staff on this.
Okay, Councillor Palazzo is moving the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Supplemental.
Sorry?
Supplemental.
Do we have to move the supplemental? It's the same, okay. Okay, 32.7, final report, 55 and 69 Pelham Avenue, city initiated official plan amendment. Are there any speakers on 55 and 69 Pelham Avenue? No speakers on 32.7? Seeing none, questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to move the recommendations from city staff once again. And this city-initiated amendment to the OP and to change from neighborhoods to core employment, and simply that's to create a parking for this great actually commercial establishment that's bringing employment to the area.
Thank you, Councillor Palacio. Councillor Palacio is moving the staff recs. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 32.8, final report, 135 Plunkett Road, zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan subdivision application. Are there any speakers to the item? 32.8 Plunkett Road, any speakers to the item? Seeing none, questions of staff? Councillor Campbell.
Is this the one that's the former, it's the former Catholic school site, so I've got some questions about Parkland. Just wondering why,
Councillor Campbell, can you move your mic a little bit closer if you don't mind, please?
I don't know who's going to answer this, somebody from staff. So on attachment 3, attachment 4, it shows the, this is phase 2, right? So this is phase 1 has already been developed?
Phase 1 has been approved through the Ontario Municipal Board.
And in either of phase 1 or phase 2 was land set aside for parkland. This, I gather all of this was a Catholic school site?
Yes, it was.
The entire site?
Yes.
And of course, this is, you know, for these neighborhoods, it's a loss of green space. Was any part of this parcel of land set aside for parkland?
No, it would be cash in lieu.
So I don't understand why that happens. So in both Phase 1 and in Phase 2, there's no provision for any parkland.
At this time, Parks felt that there are existing parks in close vicinity, and that there is sufficient outdoor private amenity space for each of the semi-detached lots.
Okay, it's not my area. I mean, I would be concerned about it, but was there the community consultation? What happened to the community consultation?
There was a community consultation on May the 2nd, and that was not a concern raised.
There was not a concern raised. Okay, thank you.
Question.
Councillor Manley, the question?
So this has been a topic of conversation in the area, and the money that is being received cash in lieu, where's that gonna go?
So typically with cash in lieu, it stays with the park system in Toronto, in
All
the
of it?
city. Yes,
All of it?
all of it,
My understanding is the community gets some of it.
within the ward.
Yeah. So that's my question, how much do we get?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll try to answer from memory. If I recall, the parkland dedication is supposed to be 25% for local parkland improvements, 25% for local parkland acquisition, and then 50% into the citywide parkland acquisition fund. I believe that's how it's distributed.
So what's the percentage?
As I said, I think it's 25% local parkland acquisition,
Okay.
25% local parkland improvements, and I believe it's 50% for citywide parkland acquisition. Again, I'm going by memory on that.
So one of the conversations we did have was that at 25%, and staff, I believe we're gonna get back to me on it, was to take the 25% and put it towards the big oak tree.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of that conversation. Obviously, park staff didn't raise it during the conversation on this application. I don't see park staff here.
So is
My
it in
suggestion,
order, is
if-
it in order for me to move a motion at this particular time that speaks to taking that 25% and putting it towards the acquisition of the oak tree, given that the committee has just endorsed it with a 50%, 50%?
Subject to my legal colleague over there, I would think it would be, yes, I would think you would have the ability to move a motion to have council change the distribution of the parkland dedication and target it for an appropriate parkland and or green thing like the tree you're speaking to.
Or Apted Park?
Pardon me?
There's another one, Apted. Is nobody here from Parks?
I don't
For
see
real?
anyone from Parks.
Can I get someone from Parks here? Like, these are the things that I
Okay.
get worried.
We're gonna hold it down, we'll see if we get Parks here. We'll hold it down, Councillor
Somebody
Manley.
from Parks is here.
Okay, we're gonna hold it
We'll
down.
send an email to Nick Aristo and see if we can get him down.
Okay, we're gonna hold it down and get park staff here. 32.4, final report, Hyde Park Apartment Neighborhood Area Urban Design Guidelines. We have a number of speakers. Viola Varga. Ms. Varga here? Okay. Okay, Mark Sterling. Is Mark Sterling here? Good afternoon, Mr. Sterling. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
And you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Mark Sterling. I'm the urban design consultant to the owners of 299 Glen Lake Avenue. And we have some comments on the apartment neighborhood area character study draft urban design guidelines that are before you. First of all, we'd like to say that we appreciated the ability to participate in the consultation process that created those guidelines, and we think that for the most part they reflect an appropriate approach to future development in the area, although we do have a couple of concerns that we'd like to raise. The first concern that we have is that we're concerned about the use of building setbacks to internal lot lines within the larger blocks in the High Park neighborhood area. We think that that's an impractical way of dealing with the separation between new and existing buildings. We think that it's more appropriate to deal with those separations on a full block basis. That's a much more practical way of solution, and it's a way of getting around the vagaries of where somewhat arbitrary lot lines are drawn or redrawn during the redevelopment process. So that's one recommendation we would make in relation to the guidelines. The second recommendation that we have is that we understand that the guidelines and the setbacks contained in the guidelines make an exemption for side lot or rear lot setbacks for parts of buildings that are covering existing or proposed parking garages in the area. We think that's a good idea in the first instance. What we don't think is a good idea is to restrict the height of elements that are on top of these parking garages to 1 story. We think that building elements, including units, should be able to be proposed in the space that's covering the parking lot ramps. We think that rather than having a bunch of single-story bump outs on the side walls of existing buildings, that actually having those ramps and their enclosures incorporated into the complete design of proposed buildings would be much more appropriate. And as such, we recommend that sections 5.4.2a, I, and C be deleted from the guidelines, and that's a fairly detailed recommendation. We also have some concerns that we'd like to raise about the sun shadow requirements that are found in section 5.6. Particularly, we have a concern about the reference to subsections A and B, which require that sunlight be maintained on the streets, sidewalks, and open spaces in apartment neighborhoods for 5 hours between 9:18 and 6:18 p.m. Our concern is that that's relatively close to impossible to achieve within the area of the existing built-up area of the apartment neighborhoods, and that new development will be significantly difficult. It would be significantly difficult for new development to achieve those standards both on their own lands and on adjacent lands. So we think that sort of standard should be changed. The other component of the sunlight and shadow concerns we have is that there's this idea that in 5.6.1 that the sunlight and shadow would be limited from development and redevelopment between 9:18 and 6:18 to 5 hours minimum on streets and sidewalks, 5 hours minimum in open space for lands designated apartment neighborhoods, as I mentioned, and 7 hours minimum for lands designated neighborhoods. In particular, we're concerned about the standard that's being applied to sidewalks. The way that it's written, it actually would basically be impossible to achieve on sidewalks immediately adjacent to development. Typically, these sunlight standards are applied on sidewalks opposite new development, not adjacent to it, because even a 3-story building will cast shadow typically onto its adjacent sidewalks. So this is a kind of north-south side of the street kind of concerns. So as a result, we recommend that in 5.6.1, those 3-hour requirements, 5 hours on streets and sidewalks, 5 hours on the open spaces in the apartment neighborhoods, and the 7 hours minimum for lands designated neighborhoods be.
If you could please wrap up.
Be deleted.
Yep.
That's most of my comments. The other concern that my clients and I have is that we had a very, very short time to review the final document. We got it yesterday, basically. And we're concerned that some of these things, which are more or less practical considerations, could be refined as time goes on.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Any questions of the deputant? Questions? No, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
So the next deputant is Lenka Hallebeck. Yes, good afternoon. You have 5 minutes, so please bring the microphone a little lower to you, and go ahead, you can start whenever you're ready.
As you are aware, I already stood in front of you not so long time ago on June 6th, and I was addressing um, the angle of the issue, which is natural heritage, protection of the natural heritage, which is becoming a paramount issue in fast-growing Toronto. On paper, we have very powerful policies that the city, the planning, and developers are supposed to be familiar with and follow and implement. But reality is different. Before I get to the nucleus of my communication, let me read a brief quote from the conversation that the National Observer had with the former chief city planner Jennifer Kismat on April 2017. One of the challenges that we have is that we are experiencing something of a vortex, sucking all kinds of growth right into the heart of the city. One of the really important roles for municipal government to play is to ensure that we have clarity as to where growth will go, as well as where growth won't go. For these proposals and this secondary study, this clarity has been of a paramount importance because it is taking place in adjacency of one of the most significant city natural heritage, where any misstep or compromise may just fail to do the job. And the job, according to the Provincial Policy Statement 2014, is to preserve this precious, one-of-a-kind natural heritage for the long term. Toronto is now a city on one hand aspiring to become a leader in championing urban biodiversity, and on the other hand making the planning decisions impacting one of the most significant city natural heritage, High Park. So I would say that clearly Toronto is suffering a very difficult dilemma, which is not going to go away easily unless we make those right decisions. And the planning decisions, according to the policies, are supposed to be at the forefront of protecting natural heritage. Everything else comes second. Management plans, things the community can do. The planning decisions are here to safeguard the little remaining natural heritage we have within the city boundaries. It was crucial that the City Council consideration on final report of this study, amendment number 419 and SASP 551 was fully consistent with provincial policy statement and the city official plan policies. In my opinion, we are still not there. We are still here trying to compromise. Now, the compromise ultimately may work for the developers. It may work for the city, the councillors. It may work, if we do it well, for Toronto District School Board. But it will not work for the natural heritage, because as our own health, natural heritage has to be treated holistically. So we either do it well or we lose. Compromise don't work. As presented today, High Park Apartment Neighborhood Area Urban Design Guidelines seem too vague to address following concerns. Only sustainable density and corresponding user demands from nearby area combined with best management strategies is solution for natural heritage if it's here to be preserved for a long term, as provincial policy statement, other policies intend. High Park is an irreplaceable natural asset and biodiversity hotspot, connecting Humber River South Marshes with natural areas along the waterfront. These natural places and wildlife habitats have low wear tolerance and deteriorate relatively quickly under conditions of overuse.
Could you wrap up, please?
I'm out?
You wrap up, you
All right.
please.
Okay. Thank you for your attention, Council.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions of the deputy? Seeing none, thank you very much. Are there any further speakers to the item? Final report, High Park Avenue, neighborhood 32.4. Oh, there's just made it.
We had to run over from City Hall because we were had to sing on the junction.
Very good. Well, welcome, and
Yes.
I know you've been here before, and
Yes.
you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well, I was just talking about the junction, and I think that though you guys are looking at the official plan here, or you think you're looking at it, I've looked at this for a long time, and I was at the OMB fighting for the Daniels building, the first significant building in the area. And we won, the thing we won at the OMB was adjacency. The city did not even regard across from High Park as adjacent. So this has changed the rules of the game with regards to High Park. The only thing is that the city is very slow in changing that there is actually adjacent. And the mistake about why this kind of intensification is happening north of us, or that it is a place for intensification, is began, as I said in the last time, when this was chosen as a place for intensification without having done a study at that time, environmental assessment. We're very late in the game here, and this is a correction, trying to correct a situation. It should have, it is in the official plan. In fact, I won adjacency at the OMB with regards, with the 3 policies, 12, 13, and 14, which clearly states that what is needed when you have, it's in the provincial policy, and it was beautifully put into our official plan as well. And what should have happened years ago, when after amalgamation and this intensification program the province foisted on us, would have been to make a zoning change north of High Park, or many things should have happened. And now we're almost our hands are tied, and we're trying to find some sort of little shadows. We're trying to find some way, but it's not really working out so well. But we have to. It is in the official plan. I have to tell you that it is in the official plan that this area should have been protected. It is, you guys just didn't do follow the correct process. And to let High Park go, this is a vital part of Toronto. And I was just talking about the junction as a major tourist attraction. The provincial policy says that Toronto is a gateway to tourists, meaning that you are required to have the tourist come to Toronto, see Toronto, and then want to go to see the rest of Ontario. This is a requirement of you. And if we allow intensification to be overshadow High Park for the many, High Park is worth more than the money that the developers are going to give us. It is a big draw for Toronto, and we can't just, we have to make a huge effort to fix the mistake that we have made. And it is in the official plan. It's just that you guys have not followed it. Anyway. High Park, we cannot see it like, just like with the junction, as any other place in Toronto. This is what you're trying to do. You're trying to fit it in, you're trying to say intensification here, and it should be everywhere. No, that's not how it works, and that's not how the province said it should work. I know you guys are pressured by intensification. The pressure is so great, and it's unfair. And I mean to speak with Doug Ford about this, that, you know, just like Hydro One, we're literally giving away our most valuable assets. And this intensification is just not, has gone way out of control. And I hope he will listen to this, because we do want to have a future in Toronto, and we do want to keep Hyde Park as viable, environmental.
Thank you, you're out of time, thank you. Is there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Any further speakers to the item? Yes, sir. Please come forward, state your name.
Jim Baxter.
Hey, Jim. Good afternoon, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
And Jim, you just pull that mic up just a wee bit there.
Hi, I live in the neighborhood. What you're planning, well, what the developers are planning to do to the complex of condos already there is just obscene. It's going to be another Jamestown. We do not have the infrastructure. We do not have the schools. They're all at capacity. The roads at this point are already getting gridlocked. There's got to be some common sense used here to stop the super intensity of the planned developments. Please don't let this go through as planned. We need to study all of them together. Right now we're going through 4 or 5 along Dundas Street. Any one of them by itself is not an issue, but all of them together is going to destroy the Junction Conservation District just as we're getting going. It's a character area that is going to be destroyed, that we're trying to protect. These condos blow our little projects out of the water. There's going to be so many people. It's going to take the Junction, which has become one of the most popular places to live in Toronto, and become another inner city ghetto. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Seeing none, okay, questions of staff. Councillor Doucette.
I just have 1 or 2 quick questions of staff, please. If you could just talk about the consultation we have gone through
Excuse me, sorry.
on this process, that would be great. And who was involved in the consultation we've done.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. So we made a presentation at the last meeting talking about the area character study. And I'm just going to put up one slide. That's just a summary of all of the many meetings that we had as part of the area character study. So 2 community meetings, the statutory public meeting that we had at this last community council. We had a working group of 18 members. We had 6 working group meetings. We presented to the design review panel twice, and we had a online mapping tool that we went out to the community with and learned about the places of value and importance and what issues needed to be considered. So all of that fed into the study. It fed into the official plan amendment that you approved at the last meeting. And then we also, from that, developed guiding principles, which led to the goals and objectives from the study and ultimately informed the urban design guidelines that are before you today. And then just to answer the second part about the guidelines.
Sorry, who was involved in the working group? I know it was 18 people, but who, I think you've got that as well, haven't you?
Yeah, so it's comprised of all of the major landowners within the area were invited to participate, and all of the applicants with active development applications participated, as well as the residents associations active within the community and the surrounding neighborhoods, as well as a number of community members at large with particular areas of interest.
Now, I know it's not actually before us right now, which will be later in the agenda. there were 2 applications which were in with planning before we started this study, is that correct?
Correct.
And we have had 1 come in before this study is approved, but after the study was started.
Correct.
So, according to planning, those applications should be looking at the tools in place at that point in time. However, if they've gone through our working group with us, they are aware of what we were wanting and planning was putting into this study.
Okay, I need to jump in here. Through you, Mr. Chair. We have to be very careful how we phrase the response to this question, Councillor,
Okay.
because we have to recognize that the 2 applications that you're talking about are under appeal at the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal.
Correct.
So, when you say something like when the application's predated, what does that mean? I would stay away from answering that question in any kind of open forum, because that's going to be one of the matters of debate and discussion at the tribunal. But if what you're getting at is we had 2 applications that staff are of the opinion are out of character with the community context, I would say that is true. The first 2 are out of character.
Right.
Then we launched the character study and the design guidelines that are before you today. We have a subsequent development application that was submitted about 3 weeks ago that is substantively in keeping with the results of what we found through the character study. Does that help?
That definitely helps. And my last question is, those 3 property owners were part of the working group?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Doucette to speak.
Thank you very much. I do want to start by once again thanking the staff, Alison, Jennifer, Elizabeth, and Sarah Henstock for her leadership, and she was at most of the meetings as well. These ladies have worked very hard, and they have communicated constantly with the community. This is not a planning report without input from not just the working group, where we did have 18 residents, and they were brought on thinking we'd have 3 or 4 meetings. We had 6 meetings because there was so much information for everyone to understand and digest and give guidance onto what the community felt the character of the area is, the usage. We looked at, I know you haven't had a chance to look at this report. It is a very full report. You will see shadow studies right now of this apartment neighborhood, which majority was built in the 60s, basically in the 60s. You'll see where the shadows are now, where we have open space, where we have sunlight. One of the most fascinating things also is where, not looking at just the buildings on top, underground, where we have massing of garage spaces, where on top of those we can never ever grow mature trees, where we know the rainwater can't go into, which is one of the things we heard a lot about, and you've heard today, and you'll hear at every meeting when we're talking about development or the part of High Park or north of High Park. High Park is, as you've heard, 400 acres of black oak savannas, they're ANSIs, they're ESAs. It's the jewel of our city, the lungs of our city. We have to protect it. That is one of the biggest concerns we had. So that's why I think that this character study is so important. It didn't look at the developments in which were at planning at the time. It looked at the neighborhood and what we need to do to protect the neighborhood, which does include High Park. Unfortunately, in character studies, parks have not been considered, the same as you heard last month. Lower West Avenue study. Avenue studies don't look at parks, but both of these studies we've done have looked at the park. I will be moving a motion at Parks and Environment next week to have the management plan reviewed in High Park, and I want to get that funding into 2019 budget so staff can go ahead and do that. That is one thing we have said to the community we will do, but we need the funding to do it, and I'm going to be pushing that forward. So really, I'm not going to take up much more time, even though apparently I have not spoken at all. I'm looking for your support. This is a very good study. A lot of work has gone into it. A lot of really interesting information has come out of it. I do believe that this will do what we need it to do. Part of it will be in the official plan, part will be in zoning. It's really taken into consideration what is there, how the neighbors and the residents use the area, and what we need to preserve. So thank you very much. And thank you, staff, again.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Councillor Memoli to speak.
Well, you got your wish, Councillor Nunziata. Actually, I wasn't going to say anything until you encouraged me to.
I didn't encourage you.
All right. Councillor.
So this has been an ongoing application for many, many years. And while I don't envy the local councillor, I think the community's right. And I'm not going to be supporting this kind of density because I don't think Hyde Park deserves the density that they have. It is a gem, in my opinion. And if you just want to condense everybody into one area, you're looking for trouble. And so those that have come forward to suggest that that's going to be the case are right. And so while it's easy for us as a community council to look at these applications and listen to the City of Toronto staff to say this conforms to whatever bylaw we've put together, the real questions have to be asked on how we got the bylaw passed to begin with that encourages these kinds of applications. And that's done at City Hall. And it's done through the official plan, and that official plan is amended regularly. And so those are the kinds of conversations that I think communities need to be having with the City of Toronto. The problem is most people are working for a living and don't have the time to go down to those committees to give their input when we pass those bylaws once every term of office, or more, depending on the years. But in this particular case, all you have to do is travel Bloor Street to understand how congested it is right now. And now we're asking for more congestion along that corridor. And in my opinion, it's not going to work. What's going to happen now is you're going to get even more cars and more people, and then we're going to have, I'm sorry to say this, the left-leaning councillors come and say we got to restrict the cars from going along Bloor Street. And then it's going to create another war within the community of those that have cars and those that don't. This is a disaster waiting to happen, and I can't support it. I don't care if some people think that the architecture kind of conforms to the community. What doesn't conform to the community is the fact that City Hall really hasn't listened to all the people that have come here over the years to talk about how they don't want the density. And instead what we're giving them is density. So clearly there's a disconnect between what communities are saying and what City Hall is doing.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Nunziata?
Yeah, I had to speak after I heard the councillor speak. First of all, City Hall is listening to what the community is saying because they've had 6 community meetings, correct? So they are listening to the community, and I think that the local councillor is, she's worked with the community. There's been a consensus with the community, and I think each individual application will be treated separately. And I think this is wonderful that this study is being done. I'm looking forward to my study, which I've waited for a long time. So I support the recommendation.
Anybody else? Okay, Councillor Doucette is moving the staff recommendations. All in favor? Recorded vote. Councillor Giorgio, Councillor Doucette, Councillor Palacio, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Grimes, Deputy Mayor Holiday, Councillor DeChano, and Councillor Ford. In opposition, Councillor Mamalidi. That carries. Next item, 32.2, Fund Report 2978, 2988 Dundas Street West and 406, 408 Pacific Avenue, zoning bylaw amendment and rental housing demolition and conversion applications. We have a number of speakers. Our first speaker, Viola Viagra. Thank you. Welcome back. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. I've been talking about the junction. Yeah, the thing with the junction is just like High Park. It's a very unique situation that we have yet to discover because we haven't done a study. We're asking for a Heritage Conservation District study. And in the application, Tina Leslie hired somebody, and he found that the junction has, in all of Toronto, it has the most consecutive heritage buildings. The only problem is that only a few of them have been designated. And it is only the value of the junction, which we have just, it went to seed because it became a poor area. And this is why we have these buildings, because it actually went to seed, and we have rediscovered it, cleaned it up. We spent a lot of money cleaning it up. And the thing is that now these developers, the one we're talking about today, he's building an 8-story building, and the buildings in the junction are only 2 or 3 stories, 4 max. And the building, the 8 stories, is a teeny sliver of a piece of land, and it's like a tower in the junction. And it'll crush, it'll topple the junction like dominoes. The buildings the land is worth more now than the heritage itself. And the junction is only worth, the buildings, they're nice, but only as a collection of buildings. The most consecutive historical buildings in Toronto. And this is for the future. Now, at this moment, it's an evening spot, a night spot, and a weekend. People are flocking. It's a big tourist draw. I see tourist bus. There was a tourist bus sitting in front of my house. I'm not even on a main street a few weeks ago. And again, the provincial policy requires Toronto to be a gateway to tourism. So when people get a taste, they get a taste of what Canada has to offer, and they want to go see the rest of Ontario, you know? And this is a sliver of history, and this intensification at the cost of what we don't even know the value of this yet. We have the heritage study is waiting to be done, and this building, Pacific, is so incongruous. It displaces, and the late Rob Ford said it was an eyesore when it came up a few years ago. So we've held out for you guys to get your work done and to see this, but you're too slow in this. If this building gets built, it'll demolished. They're already talking about demolition. It takes a little piece of the junction, and it gives us, and the building that's going to be built looks like everywhere else in Toronto. So this area it's kind of a cut-off area because all the roads go through here. When people drive through, they're going to say, "Oh, well, this looks like every other part of Toronto. Why even bother stopping here?" So we have these situations that are very unique, and this official plan that you guys are so proud of is just bulldozing it, because you guys don't see everything is supposed to look like everything else, and it isn't like that. And therefore, these unique situations, we're just letting them go, like slip through our hands. You know, these buildings, this 8-story building, right away, right across the road is now a building, a land grab that is 3 times this. So this is just, you know, it's just ballooning, you know, because intensification means more and more. There's no limit to this. And we have Junction, which is so small and you know, it can't take this. And heritage is so fragile. So we're devastated by this, and we've been warning you for years.
Please wrap up. You're out of time. Thank you.
You know, this is not, was on the agenda for a long time, and we've been telling you. And you're letting the junction go.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Our next speaker, Robert Millwood. Good afternoon, Mr. Millward. Welcome. You have
Good
5 minutes,
afternoon, Chair and councilors. My name is Robert Millward. I'm from R.E. Millward and Associates Planning Firm. We are here representing the owners, and we want to say that we support the planning report completely. I'd like to make just 2 points, if I may. Kind of concerns that we've heard from the community that we've tried to address. One is the sort of built form. There was an earlier approval on this site for a smaller building at the corner in 2015. That was approved as a zoning bylaw. Our client, subsequent to that, acquired additional properties and hence the revised application. But what we've done during that period of time, there have been changes to the mid-rise guidelines. There is a requirement to step back after, because of the 20 meters of Dundas, to step back after 80 height, 80 meters and 80 feet rather. And we have done that to the best we can. We've also respected the angular planes to the rear completely, and we've also kind of scale the building down as it moves west, so it will fit more in the context of the surrounding area. The second point, just with regard to heritage and character, which you've heard deputants on, we did have a heritage impact assessment study. We've submitted that to planning. The heritage impact assessment study it found no major impacts on adjacent heritage properties. These properties are not heritage. And I think in addition, the building design references the context through step backs at the 3 meter cornice line, scale and rhythm of storefronts, et cetera. So we think we've done the best that we can to respect the neighborhood character. And 2 other small points. The retail in the revised scheme has been broken up into 2 smaller spaces. There was a concern that it would be a kind of a very large retail box that would go in there. So we have 2 smaller retail spaces. We also have lowered the height. The minimum is 4.5 meters. As you know, on the street, we've lowered it to 4. Why? Because it's more in keeping with the character on the street. So it's in that. With that, I would just urge you to support the report. It is there is replacement housing built into that. The report details that fully, but we are completely in agreement with the planning report.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much. One of the concerns we've heard from the BIA and from local residents is that this part of Pacific is often shut down for community events. Am I correct in saying that you are prepared to work with our community when you come to landscaping on the Pacific side?
Yes, we fully support the idea. We know that Pacific is important in the summer, so our client was certainly with landscaping, and we're prepared to engage with the city to come up with the best solution.
Thank you very much.
Seeing no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Wood. I would like to recognize Mr. Millward as the former commissioner of the old City of Toronto, the former City of Toronto, so welcome. Our next deputant, Jim Baxter. Welcome back, Mr. Baxter, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for hearing me. May I refer to the developer's heritage report and executive summary. The statement is made that the design responds to the scale and material composition of the junction neighborhood built form, context offering a compatibility with the architectural and industrial heritage of the area. Specifically, the incorporation of setbacks above the 3rd story of the development provides a massing that responds to the scale of the adjacent listed property at 2975 Dundas West and 437 Pacific Avenue. This is the an image of what they're proposing. Clearly, here is the podium, which is 5 stories. It sets down at the west end to be more in scale with the 3-story that's on the west side. And it steps down just this last little bit, and it goes next to a 2-story house, not a 3-story house. In actual fact, as seen in the cover image, the podium height is a prominent portion of the proposed building, is 5 stories, not 3. The section most proximal to the listed 3-story heritage property, James Hall, which is kitty corner at 2975 Dundas West, is clearly 5 stories. Further, how can this modernist building form with disproportionately large windows and balconies be compared with the existing 100-year-plus build form where no balconies exist? How is the massiveness of this 9-story, which is including the rooftop amenities and elevator room, be compared to the adjacent 3- and 2-story buildings? On page 33, the proposed massing maintains the continuity and rhythm of the street while achieving a compatible scale with neighboring properties on Dundas Street West, including the listed property at 2975 Dundas West. So page 30 and 31. If you can see the massing of the main building, this is the 3-story building. That's this dwarf little thing on the west side. On the plan view, where you can see the house next to it, it's maintaining that this mass is proportional to this 2-story house. I'm just wondering if the author is looking at the same set of drawings that were given. The gradual incorporation of setbacks above the 3rd level maintains a scale compatible to the adjacent listed properties, 2975 and 437. Clearly it does not. As well as the low-rise residential neighborhood directly to the north of the development, which is all 2-story houses. The extensive use of brick masonry and concrete panels responds to the material vernacular of the area while referencing the area's industrial heritage. I don't mean to be facetious, but I don't see what he's talking about. How is the massing comparable to the little house in the north, which is the 2 stories, and they're labeling it as 3, and the 3-story to the west, which until very recently was only 2 stories, and all the houses further along to the west are only 2 stories. Again, how is the gradual incorporation of setbacks above the 3rd level compatible to the adjacent buildings? It's building versus air. I'm looking at an image of the proposed structure and a picture of James Hall. I'm not seeing a common material vernacular whatsoever. So you've seen what they're proposing. This is James Hall. It's 3 stories. It's 1880s architecture. It's just, they were writing words that have no factual meaning.
You wrap up, sir. Your time's up.
Okay.
Questions? Seeing none? Thank you. Question, Councillor Memoli.
We're hearing regularly that there's been process, that people have been talked to, so I want to hear from you because you're in the community. Have you proposed anything different than what they're proposing?
I would love to sit down with the architects and discuss a 3-story cornice line that is in keeping with the character of the area, the build form of 100 years ago. And I want them to show me how they can set back at 3 stories and build up and make it so I don't see it.
But how
I'm
long
open
has this
to
been in the works for? How long has the dialogue been going?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm inundated with so many of these. This is one of the furthest ones away from my house, but it has become a very dominant problem. I believe it's been a few years, but
And have you been vocal all this time?
I try to be.
Has anybody brought you into a room and said, hey, what do you think? Here's what we're doing?
No. Like I said, I would love that opportunity. I am now a director of the new Junction Conservation District, Heritage Conservation District. We're being blown out of the water just as we're trying to get our footing. And if one proposal, which is the Green and Ross tire store, has been approved, I didn't have a chance to wait around downtown for the project that's calling itself the Junction House, which is huge with a large neon billboard on top of it. They're so removed from the area. They're saying they're a vital part of the Junction Triangle, which is the other side of the tracks. Then we also have another project on Keel at Vine. We know that there's a project in the works for the west side of Pacific. We're just, if all of these get through, which are all being treated individually, they're looked at in a vacuum. And any one of them, okay, is not going to make a huge dent on our community, but all of them together is going to make a disaster. And once they get through, anybody else who applies is going to be rubber stamped because the precedence is there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. Next speaker, Tina Leslie, President of the Junction Heritage Conservation District. Good afternoon, Ms. Leslie. Welcome. Welcome back. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to share details about the Junction HCD and concerns about the proposed redevelopment of 4 properties as presented to the community at an open house on June 20th. As chair of the Junction HCD board, it is once again my privilege to share objections from our dedicated volunteers and community supporters and urge you to reject the excessive redevelopment plans proposed for the accumulated lands at 2978 through 2988 Dundas Street West and 406, 408 Pacific Avenue. Why do we need to repeat errors from lessons learned in other areas of the city? Every one of your communities are facing the same intensification pressures along with the stresses that are being placed on the neighborhoods and the residents. We only need to look at the experience of our first mid-rise building. It was a light gray box on the series of maps that you received. The Duke condo at 7 stories was actually part of the 2015 evaluation of the mid-rise built form that reinforced the need to reduce building heights on 20-meter roads, and recommended changes were approved by council in 2016. Any exception today invalidates council's intent to mitigate the unintended consequences from reoccurring on the smallest 20-meter avenue road widths. Etobicoke Council and Planning and Growth Management members may remember the first version from September 2014, which was used as another example of the unintended consequences on our 20-meter avenue. Incidentally, the Duke also has a single commercial shop on the main street, which is not in keeping with the fine grain retail fabric of our historic streetscape, And the one shop is an LCBO, which is very ironic considering the 93 years of alcohol prohibition in the junction that was repealed in 1997. We hope you've had an opportunity to read our letter and to peruse the maps which illustrate the black holes in our contiguous heritage streetscape fabric that are being contemplated by several multi-property proposals that we are facing at this moment, essentially seeking to preempt our Phase 1 heritage study that was approved in January 2018. The cumulative effect of these redevelopment projects scattered throughout our impending heritage district is catastrophic if implemented as proposed. Any one of these projects establishes an incompatible precedent for other applications, and each has the potential to undermine the character and value of the junction as a heritage district. Our letter and analysis highlights issues with other mid-rise performance standards that were ignored. You've already seen an image of the building. It has a 5-story corner section that's not in keeping with anything that currently exists, and stepping back at the 5th floor that we are now seeing replicated in all the other projects. We are doing our part to ensure that the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, the city's official plan and policies, and the mid-rise performance standards are being applied consistently and equitably. We need staff and council members to also ensure that development applications are held accountable to these same exemplary standards as they have been published and approved. We hope you will deny the applicant approval to proceed with the redevelopment proposal until it complies with the 6-story height maximum and other invaluable performance standards. We appreciate the architect's use of brick in this revised version, but as you've heard, it will dominate our landscape instead of the view that you would see of the adjacent heritage building, the former town hall and council chambers. We hope you will not grant any exceptions to exceed the mid-rise height of 16 meters. We understand the need for growth and intensification, but we are sure the intent of the policies was not to be implemented at the expense of historic character value. The curse of undisciplined growth is well known. It was more than 2 decades ago that a PepsiCo Inc. CEO warned that growth for its own sake is the logic of a cancer cell. I also have a quote from Councillor Josh Matlow. Far too many main streets are being affected by developments that care more for reaching the sky than what happens at street level. And this statement applies to the Junction, a neighborhood that has a rich and vibrant legacy with a formative history that dates back to the early 1800s.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our next speaker, Sharon Reed. Good afternoon, Ms. Reed. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
You have 5 minutes.
I just wanted to give you guys a different position, a different side. I went to one of the meetings that was organized by the councilor in the area to meet with the developers and to be with the neighbors to get a sense of what was going on with this new development. And what I heard was basically that there was nothing that we could do. This development was going to go through. This was something that the council had decided was necessary and important for intensifying all of the avenues. And as we looked through the various diagrams and pictures and plans, all of which were very detailed and complex, I kept hearing things that were incompatible with what I was seeing. So I was hearing, oh, it's going to be the same as the 3-story line that follows all down that street, but actually the storyline is suddenly 5 stories. Oh, it's going to be under 20 meters, but when you actually look at the drawings, there's a whole bunch of stuff on top of the 20 meters that doesn't really count. That's what's kind of 8 extra meters that isn't actually counted. And I was really confused by this and very frustrated, and I thought, well, we have an opportunity now just to, ask you to have a second look at this, to really have a look at our neighborhood, our history of this section of the city that is truly unique. It is a very special place. You go down that street, it is attractive to films. We just had a film company in just last week filming. They shut our street down so that they could put it on the movies. I can see it on Warehouse 13. I see our buildings on TV. It's so super cool. Like, this is a really neat place, and we are now going to take it. And we've already heard that there's a shard that has been agreed, and that it's going to go up 8+ stories. And now they want to make it wider, bigger. I think this is an opportunity for us. You want to open this up for discussion? I think that's great. But let's have an opportunity to have a discussion about bringing it down to a size that is reasonable, that actually fits, making it a character that is in keeping with what our neighborhood is all about, and not so extreme, not so jarringly out of keeping with what we have. I have a few minutes, so I just wanted to tell you about how hard it is to get on the subway. It's at 6 o'clock at night on my way home to get back to the junction. That I often will miss 3 trains to get on because it is so busy getting there. I can tell you, when we try to get down Keel Street, just to get down Keel, it is so chock-a-block trying to get to our neighborhood right now. It's crazy. You can't imagine how bad it is just driving around our neighborhood. So our buses are full, our streets are full, and now we've got a whole inundation of all these buildings with each one, okay, fine, maybe not that many people per building, but when you add up all the number of buildings that are coming in now, fast and furious, where are we going to put all those people? How are we going to support that? Where's the infrastructure money going to come from? What's going to happen with the internet, with the sewers, with the water, with the drainage, with the parks, with the schools? Like, there's this whole wide world of stuff that one individual developer isn't going to be able to do. And one at a time is going to have a really hard time dealing with. We need a plan for you guys, something that's unified, that really takes into account, how great it is already. And absolutely, we think we should have some new developments, some new buildings. Everybody likes a new building, yeah? And some of those buildings are gonna look pretty sharp. And some of them are a bit tired and they need replacing. But they need to be replaced in a way that's in keeping. They need to be replaced in a way that's thoughtful, that takes into account everything we need. And just telling us, well, yep, it's in accordance with the new bylaws, it's in accordance with the plan. This is very frustrating, so I thought I'd come and speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Our next speaker, Ken Sherratt. Good afternoon, Mr. Sherratt. Welcome, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Very much. Pleasure to be here. My name is Ken Sherratt. I live at 31 Indian Road Crescent, which is probably a kilometer from the site. I go to the junction every day, have coffee there, go to the restaurant there a couple of times a week. Been doing that for a long, long time. It's a great place. Had a little down period a few years ago, but it's definitely on its way back. I'm here today to oppose the approval of this project as it's proposed and recommend that it be deferred. There are a number of issues. You've heard them from other people. The most irritating is the lack of a 3rd story consistently across the sides of the building. At the moment, it rises to the 5 stories, in spite of what it says in the heritage study. In addition, there doesn't seem to be a heritage study from the city at this point. And I suspect the reason for that is that we don't have a study in place in the area to guide the planners or to guide anybody. It's a free-for-all. People are coming in and putting up or proposing all sorts of stuff. And planners are trying to make a deal to, get a few levels off the top in return for something the city wants, but the end result isn't pleasing. The building is simply too tall for that area. Another aspect of the building that's been referenced is it's located right in the heart of the junction. It's kitty corner across from the historic building that was put up, the 3-story historic building. What is proposed here is a 5-story building on the opposite corner that bears no resemblance to that building. Clearly an impact. The project's in the Phase 1 study area for the Junction Heritage Conservation District that's been approved by Council. The problem is we can't get a planner in place to start the plan. So as a result, we've got 5 projects currently before us with more in the works. And there's really no yardstick to measure any of them, and we're running into the same problem when we go to community councils or other venues. We spent the morning at City Hall dealing with 2 of them, and here this afternoon with 1, and we spent a good part of yesterday at the new version of the OMB, dealing with another one where the lawyers got into a fight and nothing got done. So it's very frustrating from a resident's point of view to see what's going on here. The junction's being destroyed, and nothing seems to be being done. Planning studies have been promised since 2014, and so far nothing on the ground. One of the things that I think council needs to do is just take a breather. At the moment they're looking at each one in isolation. This one here, this one here, this one here, this one here. And what we need to do is take a step back and a more comprehensive look. And that would give us time then to get some kind of planning framework in place so we can figure out what the good and the bad and the ugly is in this neighborhood. We know it's a great neighborhood, but, and it's headed in the right direction. The city's put a ton of money in that area, and it's greatly improved. It's really coming along. But these projects are going to do a lot of damage. So we would prefer that the city take a bigger picture. The junction, as has been pointed out, is unique. It goes back to the days when it was created as a rail town with all the good things and bad things that come with that. Obviously a pretty entertaining place to live at a certain time until Bill Templeton, the temperance guy, got in there and sort of calmed things down, but it's back. We need the time for the planning study to get underway. I've lived in the area for 48 years, so obviously I think it's pretty good. I hope to live there a few more years. Although someone this morning at another meeting commented that the older people are rolling out of the area, so I hope I don't roll out for a little while. I'm concerned approval of this project now will harm the character that I like so much, and I know other people do as well, and I urge you to defer the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any further speakers to the item? No further speakers? Questions of staff? Okay, all right. Councillor Mammoliti. Sir, questions of staff? Okay, yeah, questions of staff, Councillor Mammoliti.
Just out of curiosity, is there a historical study being done in this area?
Well, the area has been identified for a heritage conservation study. That study has not started yet.
So
heritage staff here, if you...
So we've got a study going on, but we're approving development before the study's been conducted.
Well, I mean, until the study's done, we would be dealing with the process, the current sort of regulations that we have currently. Right now, the study hasn't been done, hasn't identified.
But there's an application in front of us, isn't there?
The development application, yes, there is.
So how is it that we're dealing with applications before we do a study like this? Has nobody ever asked that question? I just did when it's too late.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have Paul Macca from the Heritage Preservation Services who can talk about the process about heritage conservation districts generally. But to answer your question very basically, every applicant has a right to file a development application. And when a development application is filed and is deemed to be a complete development application, we are also bound to prepare our professional advice to community council and city council.
When did the discussion on heritage study first come about during this process? Before the application was placed or after the application?
Well, what you have to understand, as the, I think it was the proponent's planning consultant said, so this was first approved, half of the property was approved for a new building in 2015 by City Council. And I believe it was shortly thereafter that the process for an HCD was brought forward, might have been a little before then. So, 2014, okay, it was commenced in 2014. And
What was commenced, sorry, what was commenced?
so the request to have a Heritage Conservation District study done in the junction came forward in 2014.
Okay, that's before the application?
Correct. The first development application, we'd have to go back and figure that one out when that was submitted for, but I believe it was resolved in front of council in 2015?
2015.
In 2015.
Let's just go back, because I only got 5 minutes. So in 2014, there was discussion of a heritage study.
Right, so.
What happened with that?
So again,
Why
so
did-
the process is, Counselor, is that nominations go forward to undertake Heritage Conservation District studies. A group goes forward to Planning and Growth Management Committee, Paul, if memory serves? Okay, a group of nominations go forward to Planning and Growth Management Committee collectively, and then goes through Planning and Growth Management Committee and says, of these, I think the last tranche was about a dozen. Of these dozen, they get collectively looked at, and the first four get done. So the Heritage Conservation District study in the junction was in the second tranche. It wasn't in the first tranche, so it's now coming forward.
So in the junction, I mean, I can't think, well, there's only a few communities I can think that probably deserve a heritage study more than any other communities. The junction is certainly one of them. How do we accept applications before the heritage studies? Like
because
somebody, but
because legally,
let me put it a different way.
Legally, Counselor, any landowner has the ability to file a planning application at any point in time they desire.
But I get that. But there are so many experts in the city of Toronto. All of us make a lot of money. Those experts in Toronto are planners, and there's six-digit figures that we make every year. I would think that somebody in the department would say, it's the junction, folks. We should be bringing forward a recommendation to council to do a study here. Has that ever happened?
And that was done in 2014, but it was done in context, I believe it was a dozen in 2014. There was about a dozen different requests that came forward in 2014. They were ranked, they were brought forward through Planning and Growth Management Committee, and ultimately decided upon by City Council.
Okay.
And again, so there were 4 that were in the first bunch.
Was there no attempt to complete the heritage study before the applications were accepted? You try, did somebody try?
Well, what can I tell you, Councillor? We have a certain
Is that
limit
left,
of
is that
the-
left just to, is that attempt left just to politicians, the councillors? Or does staff have an obligation to say, we should be doing this study before anything
Again,
else
Councillor,
happens?
back in 2014, there were, like I said, it's about a dozen. And staff recommended that the first 4 be done immediately, and the second 4 were a lower priority. This Heritage Conservation District study was in the lower priority, and council said, yes, go do the first 4, and when you're done those 4, then start on the next one. We fast forward 4 years, 3.5 years later, and in January of this year, council said, yes, put the money aside, let's do the Heritage Conservation study in the junction.
But this application,
This application was
being
submitted in
decided upon now.
2016. Correct. Because, I mean, the gentleman has asked for deferral, that's within community council's power, and that's within council's power to defer it. But it has also been deemed a complete application, and if the applicant is not happy with that, they have an alternate route to take it to get a resolution
so
on
it's not a complete application.
it. It is a complete application.
But if I were to move deferral, that would be until, my intention would be to move a deferral until this heritage study is done. Is that in order?
Is that a deferral in order? I would guess that is in order legally.
Then Madam Clerk, that's what I want to do when I want to speak, if you don't mind preparing that for me.
Okay, Councillor DeChano, the question?
Yeah, thank you. So, 2014, the Heritage Conservation Districts were initiated, they were ranked. When is the expected completion for the junction?
Through you, Chair, I can speak to that. At their meeting council of January and February of 2018, council did prioritize the Junction Heritage Conservation District. All Heritage Conservation Districts new studies are currently on hold until they can be prioritized by until they can be, until the work plan for the city plan division can be set. But staff see the Junction Heritage Conservation District plan as a priority for 2019. So we see it as a priority. Heritage Conservation District plans, it's a process that's defined under the Ontario Heritage Act. It takes up to 2 years to go through the Ontario through the process to designate a district. First, we have to study the neighborhood, and then we have to go through a plan process.
No, I understand that. I just wanted to know when it's expected to be complete. You said that the work plan for planning, we set that every year, don't we?
Yeah.
So was it set this year?
I think what Paul is referring to is, yes, it's the internal work plan. I mean, there's a report that goes forward to Planning and Growth Management Committee in September of every year with regards to the city's city planning overall work plan. But within that work plan, we also have things like avenue studies, heritage conservation districts, and all these kinds of things that populate that. So,
but
yes,
we did get, I think City Council did provide 38 new planners last year? Around the city?
Yeah, there were some additional planning staff that were assigned to the division. I don't think it was 38 last year, Councillor. I don't think it was quite that high.
Okay, it was, I know it was substantial. All right, so so the work plan that came last year at Planning and Growth did not have this heritage study in its work plan.
As Paul is explaining, heritage conservation districts take about 2 years to complete.
Right.
So at any point in time, you have some that are ongoing and some that are working their way through to actually assign the money to. So I would have to go back and take a look at the 2018 capital budget. I would guess that the 2018 heritage capital budget was probably set aside to complete the 4 that were assigned by council starting in 2014.
There were 4, you said?
I believe it was 4, Paul.
How many have been completed in 4 years?
Again, you have to understand that they're scheduled and assigned and funded in different times. So anything that would have been completed within the last 4 years would have included ones that were started prior to that 4 years, as well as a couple.
I get that.
I get it.
I'm just trying to get an average of how slow we are at doing things.
I think our work program calls for 2 HCDs to be completed every year, if memory serves.
So it was a really simple question. Yeah. When is this particular heritage study to be completed? And if there's something coming or would have came in September, like obviously there's a work plan in the thought process, even if it hasn't been approved by council, that planning's been working on over the last couple of months. When do we see this one being initiated and completed? It's just, I'm trying to get a simple answer.
If it starts in early 2019, as staff would like it to start.
This particular one.
It typically takes up to 2 years to complete the process. That's how long it's been taking for the recent ones.
So you're thinking 2021, or by the end of 2020, that is your goal?
That would be in line with the heritage conservation districts that are going through right now. But you do, I should also point out, through you, Chair, that these are also appealable to the LPAT. So some of the heritage conservation districts that we completed in 2015 are actually still under appeal right now.
Fair enough.
For instance, the St. Lawrence Heritage Conservation District. And unlike a heritage designation, an individual heritage designation, a heritage conservation district doesn't have any interim controls built into it. So it doesn't come into effect until the appeals are finalized.
Okay. All right, those are all my questions for now. Thank you.
Councillor Nunziata had a question.
Yes, actually I have a few questions. Now I had a question for Heritage. So, well, first of all, I thought Weston was on the priority list. Like, I just don't get it. So, in areas where we know that there's a lot of development applications coming in and severance and demolition, and which is happening in my ward, I don't understand why Heritage is not communicating that to the Planning and Growth Committee, that these are priority neighborhoods that need to be bumped up for these studies, because what's happening, it's taking us so long that a lot of this development and severance and you know, committee of adjustment applications are happening, and there's nothing we can do because we're in the process. So why is it that you're not communicating that to Planning and Growth or to the Budget Committee, so we can react to it rather than, you know, we need to be proactive on these issues. So why not?
So through you, Chair, development pressure is one of the factors that we're looking at when we're making recommendations to prioritize heritage conservation districts. And that's one of the reasons why we see this particular area as an area of priority.
No, but there's other areas, like I mentioned, Weston, that same thing is happening, and we're not being proactive. I just don't know why that message isn't communicated to us when we go through the budget process and to planning and growth. But anyway, I guess that's not, you can't answer that.
Okay.
I mean, I think we're really falling behind when it comes to heritage districts and funding these studies. To the planning staff, community meetings were held on this application?
Yeah, there was a community
And how
meeting.
many community meetings and
One community meeting and one open house was held on this application, and the current application, but the previous application, I believe it was also the same where you had one community consultation meeting.
and people and the residents came out and
There
we
was,
had a
I
good
think, about-
turnout?
I think there was about 50 people that attended the community consultation. It's hard to say on the open house because people came and went, but I'd say about 25 to 30 people attended the open house.
Okay, so on page, if you can just explain to me on page 3 of 60, the owner shall erect a sign to the Toronto District School Board specifications and satisfaction prior to issuance of any building permits. What does, what?
So that's
Okay, what does
indicating
that
that there may be some shortages. Students may need to be bused to school. So that's a standard clause that the school boards require of us to put on all applications.
Yeah, okay, but if I recall at the last community council meeting, didn't we have a deputation from somebody from the school board indicating that now they were going to get more involved? Because this comment from the school board is really a comment that we've received for years, like, oh, well, you know, did she not say at the last community council meeting, whoever came to the community council, I can't remember her name, is that they will now be proactive and that they want to, when these comments, they will submit in the appropriate comments to the city that a new school needs to be built when these development applications are coming forward, rather than just a generic comment, well, yeah, you know, we're over capacity and we will bust the kids.
Yeah, in regard to your question, yes, it was on the High Park apartment neighborhood planning study that was on the agenda last time round. A legal representative on behalf of the school board did show up and asked that city council put a holding provision in the secondary, in the site and area specific policy about hold on all new development until school capacity was in effect. And you're quite right, that representative said the school board is getting much more aggressive. Interestingly enough, on all of the applications you see in front of you today, I think almost all of them have the same recommendations about signage and warning clauses. Now, recognizing that some of these applications have been around for a while, and that representative said the school board wants to get more aggressive as of January 2018, my guess is that these development applications all predated this new policy that the school board is trying to take. But having said that, you're quite right. This is the standard wording that they are asking for in almost all the applications before you today.
So it doesn't apply to any applications that were submitted in prior to January 2018. So
well, you would have to ask the school board that. Quite honestly, I don't know what the school board has intentions. We've reached out to the school board and suggested a meeting with a global meeting between the school board and planning staff is in order if they're changing the way they want to respond to development applications citywide.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Doucette?
Thank you very much. I will have questions for both, but I'll start with Greg, seeing you're standing there. So you can hear the frustration. We have gone through this in 2015 with the original building, which was approved by City Council. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
The proponents then went and purchased some more property and started another application to add those properties to the original ones.
That's correct, yes.
Am I correct that by the time that application came in, the mid-rise had been revised, and because Dundas is a character area, instead of being a 1-to-1 ratio, it's a 1-to-0.8 ratio.
That's correct, yes.
And the new section, does that comply with the 0.8? Because I know the old one was to the 1-to-1, which was in place when that came in.
No, the way we viewed the additional properties, they were transitioning down to the 1 to 80%. So the original building was taller, was the 8-story building. So what we use the additional buildings or the additional properties to transition down to the 80%. So when you get down to the west end of the property, it would be sort of in compliance with that sort of direction.
Okay.
So when we looked at the application, we didn't just look at it as a brand new site. We did take into consideration council's approval in 2015.
One of the councillors is looking at doing a deferral. What does that mean in process, in planning, in where could that go? What would could the proponent do if we were to defer this item?
I mean, it would be up to the owner. The owner could appeal that to the I guess not the Ontario LPAT.
LPAT, the new LPAT.
Yes.
Have we gone through any LPATs yet?
Neil.
Oh, got any decisions from LPATs yet? I mean, I don't know what LPAT is going to do compared to what the OMB was doing.
Right. Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I'll try to answer that question. I have been in 1, 2, 3 mediations before the LPAT. My experience is it's substantively the same as the municipal board. I'm not aware of any decisions that have been issued by LPAT yet. Oh, okay.
There has been a name change, so the Ontario Municipal Board is now LPAT, but there are certain matters that are effectively grandfathered under the old system, so they're treated similar to the way that the OMB would have dealt with them. The new system, we're just starting to have appeals that are going to be heard under the new system, so we don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but there is a different process.
So we have a positive planning report before us now. So if the owner was to go to LPAT, city planning is in favor of their development. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Right. Can I talk to Heritage, please? So again, you can hear the frustration in this room about a nomination going in 2014. I know they weren't prioritized, as was Councillor Nunziata's and others for the first batch. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is we've got X number underway right now, and at the last meeting I went to, and I think Councillor Nunziata was there as well, we were told that no new ones could start until some of the ones being worked on now are completed. Does completion include finalizing them at OMB or LPAT or wherever the heck they are?
Through you, Chair, no, that does not mean that. It means that we complete the plan. So once the district plan is completed, then we're able to start new Heritage Conservation District studies.
And you are aware that I've been going to meetings, and I know Councillor Nunziata is as well, because we've still got various councillors who are now having pressure in our wards, wishing these studies had started so that we would have, if it's going to be a district, it was designated now, because then that would be different impact with developments, right? I guess my question, sorry, now going on. So we got the timing of a study. We don't actually know if it will start in 2019. Depends on others finishing. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is dependent on what finishes in 2018, but this has certainly been identified as a priority study for 2019.
Now, what are your comments on this report before us?
Okay, so staff have reviewed the Heritage Impact Assessment that was submitted as part of the application. We had to look at the existing policy framework, and to that we look at the adjacent heritage properties. There are 2 adjacent listed heritage properties. One of them is at St. James Hall, constructed in 1888. And also there's the listed property across the street at 403 Pacifics, which is a listed house built in 1886. So we reviewed the heritage impact assessment. The HIA has been previously noted at this meeting, finds that the proposed development will not have a negative impact on the heritage properties. There's horizontal and vertical articulation that responds to the heritage building across the street. The materiality picks up on the masonry building across the street. And again, the massing is such, it's five-story massing on Dundas Street, adjacent to the 3-story heritage building across the street. And in our opinion, this does satisfy our official plan policies, and we feel it does conserve the adjacent heritage property. A lot of what we've heard today are about area context, and again, we're looking at the existing adjacencies, and from that perspective, we feel it does conserve.
And my very last question, I'm going to put you on the spot. You agree that Junction needs to start the HCD study as quickly as possible?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Giorgio?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll add some comments.
All right. Seeing no more questions, Councillor Doucette to speak.
Thank you very much. This is a difficult one, but I will be supporting the staff recommendation. I'm also pushing to get that HCD study started as quickly as possible. I know the frustration. Oh, I have a motion. Sorry, I do have a motion. So my motion is that City Council direct city planning staff to consult with myself and the local community organizations when it comes to the site plan approval process. That will get some more input from the community as to the shape and color, not the shape, the site plan, the streetscape, and the materials. The other one I'm doing, and I noticed Councillor Holliday's been using this one now as well, is we are going to be removing this address, whatever the address may end up being, from the B1 parking, on-street parking permit zone. What that means is that anyone who does buy into any of this building at all, at any point in time, cannot get an on-street parking permit. I know Pacific has permit parking on it, very, very few spots, and the last thing we want to do is, with any development, they don't either purchase or rent a spot on site, and then they try and go onto the streets. This is something I've been doing, as Transportation knows, for several years now, because I don't believe anyone moving into our neighborhood who has an opportunity to buy or rent a parking spot in a new building should be allowed to then take the community spaces away from residents who have no other option but to go onto the streets. So that's my motion I am doing. But going back to the HCD, I have gone to as many meetings as I can. I have pushed as hard as I can. We bumped up this study at a point when we could. I'm not the only councillor doing this. And I know when our nomination first went in, we weren't under so much pressure for development in this area. I know that staff can do X number of studies, and this is why I am making sure every chance I get, I am reminding preservation staff that the junction is now under pressure, and we need to get the HCD in there as an extra planning tool, and as an extra tool which will protect the building and the built form. I know the HCD community is working very hard at this point to do what is the hardest part, is identify individual buildings to get them designated. We worked hard, and Tina was here a few months ago looking at one of our buildings we needed to get designated. We succeeded in doing that. The person who had purchased it agreed with Heritage to add 2 extra floors to it, has now sold it. We don't know what is actually happening with that building. Another building on the east side of Pacific is in the process of being designated as well. When that proponent came and spoke to me about their big proposal, we made a point of telling them that that building there will be designated and they have to respect the designation of that building. So I agree with Councillor Mammoliti. It would be wonderful if I could just put a hold on this whole thing and say don't do anything until the HCD happens. Unfortunately, the province does not allow us just to put applications on the back burner and say wait. Planning has to look and review every application when they come in. And once it's deemed a complete application, as you all very well know, after X number of days, that proponent has the opportunity to appeal it, whether it's at the OMB or the new T-Lab, they have that opportunity to do that. So that is where I have a big concern. So as I say, I am supporting the staff recommendation, but I would really, really like to see this HCD move forward as quickly as possible, because we need it in place for other developments coming into this area.
Councillor Memley to speak.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move two motions. The first one is request the City Solicitor and Director of Community Planning, Etobicoke York District, to submit directly to Council for the July 23rd meeting an interim control bylaw for the junction area. The second one is that this matter be referred to the Director of Planning, Etobicoke York District, with a request that the matter be submitted to Etobicoke York Community Council at such time the heritage study for the area is available. So one is a deferral, the other one is this is where experience does come in, and you know there are people that push for term limits in council. I've been here for 28 years, and I know that an interim control bylaw might work in this particular case. An interim control bylaw will stop development and any applications from entering the planning department if it's written up and approved by council at its next meeting. That will protect the junction. It will protect the junction from the applications that might be ready to come forward over the next little while, because staff with an interim control bylaw will reject any applications until that heritage study is done. At least that's what I'm hoping this interim control bylaw will do. Most people don't know that we have this tool available to us and that we could ask council to support an interim control bylaw. I've done it before in my area. It works. Applications are not allowed to be accepted until particular studies are done in neighborhoods. If there's a neighborhood that should be studied around this, it is the junction.
If I could speak to the process here.
Who's speaking?
Here, the ability of.
You're interrupting my speech. I guess only solicitors can do that.
Some comments with respect to the interim control bylaw.
Okay, well, just so we wait till you finish. When you finish speaking, then we'll get comments from staff. Sorry.
Well, I mean, unless this is absolutely out of order and not in line with law, then I'll continue speaking, right?
Okay, speaking. Let's just
this is not only do councillors interrupt me,
Councillor Mamley, please keep speaking. Please keep speaking. Councillor Mamley, please keep speaking.
So, for me, it is frustrating to hear that over the last few years, nobody has recommended, nobody with 6 figures in salaries in the City of Toronto has recommended to the junction that there are options available to them, such as interim control bylaws, to deal with these particular matters. And I know that they're there, and we might find some excuses right now to stop this motion from going through. But if I have to do it at council, I'll do it at council. I don't know. But at the end of the day, you got to protect the junction. And I'm not from the junction. I'm from a community that actually wants some development. And in one particular case, we had 8 community meetings. My community wanted a development, and staff said no to it. In this case, we've got 1.5 meetings that took place in the community. This community doesn't want this development, and we're ramming it down their throat. Like, we're not connected to the City of Toronto. We're doing the opposite of what our communities want. Why are we not waking up to this? Why isn't anybody telling communities that they have rights, and they have rights to their own communities? This study, I'm not sure why it hasn't been deferred in the past, or why the recommendation hasn't been to defer this until the study's been done, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it here. And if what I'm doing is not legally bound, then so be it. I'll listen to the lawyer or whoever is suggesting that. But on a point of privilege, I can't stand when people interrupt anybody's speeches, let alone mine. It is the most rudest thing anybody can do. And it happens to me frequently in council, happens to me here, and staff now are interrupting. Like you know, it's so frustrating for me. Are we elected officials? Do we run the city, or does everybody else run the city?
Okay, we're going to deal with the, just 1 second. We're going to deal with the referral motion. So are you going to speak to the referral? What is your point of order?
Is, believe me, if we could do an interim control bylaw, I would have. So I'd like to hear from city legal or from planning.
Okay, so hang on, Councillor
as to why I've been told in the past I could not do this.
Okay, we'll deal with that. Right now I have to deal with the referral motions, the referral motion on the floor. Councillor Campbell, point of order?
Question of the mover when, of Councillor Doucette, and I have a question of the mover here, but.
Okay, so I'm dealing, there's a motion to refer on the floor. On which, on the referral?
I would like to get the answer on this interim control bylaw. Okay, well.
Referral, right? Okay, so I got to deal with the referral first, okay? So everybody speak to referral?
It's a referral.
Okay, Councilor Meany, could you read it out? I'm having a very hard time seeing that.
All right. So this matter be referred to the Director of Community Planning, Etobicoke York District, with a request that the matter be submitted to Etobicoke York Community Council at such time as the heritage study for this area is available. I asked staff if it was in order. Staff said it was in order, and that's why I moved it.
Okay. On the referral.
Recorded vote.
Sorry?
Recorded vote as well.
So I have a comment about the motion.
A comment?
A comment about the motion, I guess, or a question.
Is it a question of the mover?
Whatever you want to call it. So, Councillor Mamaliti, in the last City Council meeting, the new Ward 17 has been transferred to a downtown downtown East York Community Council. So would this not go there?
So I can tell you this, if this motion went to that council right now, they'd probably support it without any fight, right? Because they do a good job of protecting their own.
Okay, so. I have a question. The mover, Councillor DeGiorgio.
Councillor Mamaliti, are you aware that if this is actually...
Clarification of the motion.
If it's referred to staff and the applicant decides to appeal his application to the board, that staff would have no direction as to what position to take at the board?
Along with the applicant, there's a community. And the community would probably want to be heard at any board hearing as well. And if that board heard that we were in the midst of trying to do a heritage study and then we're accepting applications, you know, as we go along, I'm sure any board that's going to hear this application is going to ask the same question. And that is, how did this happen? How does council decide to do a heritage study and then accept applications willy-nilly?
He had an approval for an 8-story building prior to.
No, there was.
He made his application.
Okay, this is not a debate. It's
okay,
clarification of the motion.
I'll just
remember the year 2014.
Councillor Campbell, clarification of the motion.
Clarification of the motion. So you have referred this to the Director, Community Planning. That infers that the Director can have an opinion, correct? And if the Director is of the opinion that this should not be submitted, or we should not wait for the heritage study, the Director can then refer it to the City Council. Because you've actually referred it to the Director for opinion and for decision.
Takes a councillor from Ward 7, York West, to defend the junction. I'm defending the junction. And I'm defending it.
I take offense to
defending,
that.
why?
I take great
Why? This is moved by me, not you.
Through the chair, please. Okay.
So why? Because I am.
Okay, Councillor Mamaliti.
I'm sorry, this is what happens when people
Councillor, clarification of the motion. Are you done, Councillor Campbell?
I just wanted clarification because you're referring it to the Director to do what?
To report back after the heritage study is complete. If someone chooses to appeal this, then so be it. Let the community go out and air their frustrations to any board as well, any tribunal board.
Okay. Councillor DiCiano, clarification of the motion.
Yeah, now I'm confused. If the referral motion doesn't pass and staff recommendations don't pass and the applicant were to appeal to the LPAT, the staff would have to come back to us for direction on that, correct? Yep.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I would suggest that if that is the course this application takes, anytime there is appeal, then it's the solicitor with planning's assistance will usually write a request for direction report on how to handle the appeal.
And given that this would be our last month here, I guess there's enough leeway between them appealing and it coming to us, it could happen in January.
I don't think there's any guarantees in that regard, but I
Right.
think you can safely
Yeah.
assure yourself of that what's been happening with getting a board and LPAT hearing dates is it would not, I'm fairly confident would not be addressed before January of next year.
That's my clarification, thank you.
Okay, so referral motion on the floor. Recorded vote, I take it? All in favor of the referral? Councilor DeChano, Councilor Mammoliti, opposed? Councilor DeGiorgio, I'm sorry, were you in favor? So Councilor Palacio, Councilor DeChano, and Councilor Mammoliti in favor, opposed? Councilor DeGiorgio, Councilor Doucette, Councilor Nunziata, Councilor Grisanti, Councilor Grimes, Councilor Holiday, Councilor Campbell, that loses. Okay, the second motion of Councilor Mammoliti's, you're suggesting that that's out of order? Is that correct?
With respect to the interim control bylaw, interim control bylaws deal with the use. There's certain preconditions to bringing forward an interim control bylaw. So this matter, typically a planning study would have to be underway dealing with an unanticipated use. And this is not the case.
Point of order. The intent is open for this reason. I left it open on purpose because staff would invite and write up an interim control bylaw to council to put it in order and to make it in order.
Okay, so as it stands now,
so
it's out of
that's
order, is
why
that correct?
So that's why.
Okay, so I'm
do I
ruling,
need to-
my ruling is the motion is out of order.
Do I need to word it in a particular way to make it in order?
Is there any way?
In terms of the requirements, I can't see how it would achieve what.
Are you saying that if
what's
I word it in a
intended.
particular way to make it in order, that would be out of order?
If there's a particular concern with the use, as opposed to the physical built
But
form.
I can do that today.
It probably would have to go directly to council after consultation with planning
Okay.
to see if that can be.
Can't do it as a
Okay.
recommendation from community council.
Okay, my ruling, it's out of order. Feel free to challenge the chair, Councilor Mammoliti, but my ruling's out of order. Okay,
I'm going to challenge the chair on a recorded vote.
Councilor Mammoliti's challenging the chair. All in favor of upholding the chair? Councilor DeGiorgio, Councilor Doucette, Councilor Palacio, Councilor Nunziata, Councilor Grisanti, Councilor Holiday, and Councilor Campbell. Well, you're gonna support me too?
No.
Okay, so that fails, so that's long. Okay,
It's recorded, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's recorded.
I just recorded it.
You didn't record my name.
In the negative, Councilor
Councilor
Mammoliti and Councilor DeChano. Thanks for your support. Okay, Councilor Doucette, point of order.
I'm sorry, I was still
One sec.
hoping that.
Councilor Doucette, one second. Councilor Doucette, point of order.
Sorry, I'm still hoping that I can ask planning to clarify these interim control bylaws.
Okay, we dealt with that. It's out of order. We just dealt with it, so that's not being moved. It's gone. Okay?
Sorry, I wanted clarification on interim control bylaw, not
Okay, but it's not
necessarily the
before,
motion which was
Councilor Doucette, it's not before us. It's not before us. Point of order, Councilor Campbell.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I did have a question of clarification for Councilor Doucette's second motion.
Councilor Doucette, your second motion,
So
clarification of the motion.
The one about restricting this address to being allowed to get on-street parking permits?
That's correct. I want to know, first of all, I want to know if it's enforceable, and has it been done, is it enforceable, has it been done before, and are you, knowledgeable about the permit situation on adjacent streets?
Yes, yes, and yes. So yes, I have done it in this chamber before. Yes, it has been enforceable, because when someone calls in to get an on-street permit, they
Yeah,
have to give
that's
their
good.
address.
In the interest of time, I'll take your 3 yes.
So yes, yes, and yes. But thank you for asking.
This is the one you have to do on their behalf. Okay, Councilor Nunziata?
Just to speak on it briefly, is what I'm really frustrated in is the heritage studies, heritage district studies. And I know that at the last budget meeting, and Councillor DiCiano, you're on the budget committee, and Councillor Campbell, is that we specifically added money into the budget for heritage district studies. And it really is frustrating to me to hear that some of these areas, for example, the Junction and Weston area as well, is not on the priority list, where we are both experiencing applications coming in, and we're waiting for these studies to be complete. In Weston, Committee of Adjustment applications, and in the Junction. So, you know, that's the part that I just really wanted to speak on, because I really am, I'm not happy with Heritage and what their priority list and what their mandate is, because it's really not protecting areas that should be protected. And so those are my only comments.
Councillor DiCiano to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I'm going to echo Councillor Nunziata's serious frustrations with the process that we implemented. You know, a community wanted an HCD, and it's going to be 10 years before this thing comes through to fruition. I mean, that's a joke, right? It's everybody gets excited. We go to council, we approve these things, and look, I've been on planning and growth now. This is my 4th year, okay? And every year that we've been there, we've given more money, we've given more staff, and all we keep getting is the same excuses. And it's because there's work-make projects in this city to no end, and the stuff that needs to happen never happens. So by the time these appeals are over, there's going to be all kinds of development in that area. What was the point of the study? So plenty of blame to go around with how things are being managed in our departments. I think we have an opportunity as politicians here to create some leverage for the community and say no to this application. Let them go to the LPAT. It's going to be 2-3 years before they get there, and hopefully we get a heritage study. And you know what? There's some leverage. Maybe they come back to you in the meantime and say, listen, what is it that you guys need so we can make a settlement before this goes to LPAT? We've got leverage we can play here. I'm voting against this so that the community gets some leverage. Thank you.
Councillor DeGiorgio to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting the local councillor on this. You know, the planning process I know can be very frustrating, but I come at it from the point of view where, you know, most of you have had streets designated as avenues in your area, and those of us who not even get designation as an avenue on a major arterial road suffer some horrible consequences. You talk about the amount of time to get a hearing at the board. You may recall that in my area I got a hearing within 60 days. Unheard of. No community consultation, no statutory public meeting of community council, and a board hearing within 60 days. So the planning process does work in mysterious ways. However, go back to this application. There probably was an application submitted in 2014 sometime, we don't have the exact date, on a smaller property, and it was processed through the planning process, came through community council. We adopted or approved an 8-story building because Dundas was designated an avenue. Yes, on a smaller piece of property, but having that approval in his pocket, the applicant decided to acquire some additional properties. And once he acquired the additional properties, he has a right to expand whatever uses he had approved on a smaller property to the bigger property. And essentially, this particular application is a unique application because of the rights that the property owner has. And he probably, if he appealed to the board, he might even win a full 8-story building on the larger site. But that's not what he's intending to do. With the work of planning staff, what they've done is they've modified the building to gradually work the building down as he headed westward to try and accommodate or to try and comply with what this new designation protection will provide for the neighborhood. So he's trying to sort of say, you know what, if this is designated a heritage area, we will try and comply with those new regulations where the ratio is 1 to 0.8 as opposed to 1 to 1, and we'll try and accommodate and work within those constraints. And that's what has been done. by both planning staff and the applicant working together, and with the local council, and they've arrived at this massing that people may not be happy with. But the reality is, if it proceeds to the board, you may get something even worse. I've been there, and I just want to urge people to support the local councillor.
Okay, so Councillor Doucette's motion, she's got an amendment on the screen. Coming on the screen. All in favor? Recorded vote. Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor Doucette, Councillor Plazio, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Crisanti, Councillor Grimes, Councillor Holliday, and Councillor Campbell. Opposed, Councillor Mammoliti and Councillor DeChano. That passes. Clause is amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Clause is amended. All in favor? Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor Doucette, Councillor Palazzo, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Crisanti, Councillor Grimes, Councillor Holliday, Councillor Campbell. Opposed, Councillor DeChano and Councillor Mammoliti. That carries. Okay, folks. Okay, please. I have two I have to add to the agenda. Councillor Nunziata's 32.87 and Councillor Chano 32.88. All in favor of putting these on the agenda? Opposed? Opposed? That carries. They're on the agenda. Okay, folks, I have a emergency I have to attend to. I have to leave. I would, with council's indulgence, I spoke to both of you, indulgence. I have to deal with in my ward. 3251 traffic calming Palermo Drive between Browns Line and Hamilton. I'd like to move the staff recommendation number 1 and also move Etobicoke County Council reduce the speed limit from 50 to 40 on Palermo Drive between Browns Line and Hamilton Avenue. All in favor? Opposed?
I'm opposed to the change of speed limit.
Carried. And the other was the update on the request to strengthen tree protection enforcement in Long Branch. We had that last week. I circulated my my amendments. This is to strengthen the enforcement in Long Branch. I have the motion. You should have it there in front of you. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I'm going to hand the chair to Councillor Crisanti, and I have to leave. I hope to be back tonight. If not, Councillor Nunziata will chair the meeting. And please, we're short on quorum, so I think it's just Councillor Crisanti and Councillor Mammoliti won't be here tonight. So please be here, and I hope to be back. But if not, Councillor will chair the meeting. Okay? So I'll pass the chair to Councillor Crisanti. We're moving on to.
Where are we?
We're moving on to. Sorry. Oh, Councillor Mammoliti, Councillor Crisanti, Councillor Mammoliti, we were waiting for parks to come, and item 8, we're going back to item 8. Councillor Crisanti will take the chair.
Item 8.
Councillor Mammoliti, you have now park staff here to answer your questions. So with that, thank you very much.
So, sorry about that.
Item 8, so, Councilor Mammoliti, got questions and stuff, go ahead.
So it's just brought to our attention that there is Section 42 money, I believe. Is it Section 42 money?
It's always Section 42 money, correct.
It's all Section 42.
Always, always.
So how much of that actually stays in the community?
So through you, Mr. Speaker, in this situation, it is subject to the alternate rate, being in a parkland acquisition priority area. With the 31 units at site area of 7,499 at 0.4 hectares per 300 units, that would be a parkland dedication of 413 square meters, which is 5.5% of the site, which means that the 0.5 portion stays within the area. The 5% goes towards the citywide coffers as per our alternate rate bylaw, which was passed by council in 2010.
So how much money is actually staying in the community?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's no way of knowing that until the actual appraisal occurs, and the appraisal happens around just before the building permit's pulled. So I'm not familiar with the real estate values in the area. So it's about 5.5% of the value of the property the day the building permit's pulled, which includes anything that's passed within the zoning.
5.5% of the
So
value of the land.
0.5%, yeah. So it's 5% of the value of the property of phase 2.
Thank And can that money be used in local parks? Or does it have to go to new
0.5%,
parks?
the 0.5% stay, can go within local parks.
To improve local parks?
To improve local
It
parks.
doesn't have to go to create new parks?
It does not.
And so, 95% of the money goes to the big pot in the bigger picture?
Somewhere around that, yeah. In this situation, yes.
And has it ever been the case where we can ask for the whole thing?
To stay within the area? Well, as you know, Councillor, in 2010, the bylaw was passed that, I don't have to tell you all this, I've told this all to you before, that the first 5% stays within, goes with the citywide, and the above 5% goes, stays local. You have all the obligation in the world to put a motion forward that the money stays within your ward for a particular project. We've done it before. You would have to. It wouldn't get the recommendations of parks though.
Okay. But you don't know the figure right now?
I don't know, and
so any motion from me to redirect or to direct that money to the local parks would be in order.
Legal?
It could be a motion that indicates the amount of money in excess without specifying the specific amount.
Thank you.
No, it's it for Councillor Mamalidi now. It's your turn, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a former Catholic school site, and as a former trustee, I know how sensitive the loss of green space is, because there was quite a large playing area, I would imagine, here at one point in time. Is that correct? There would have been
That's correct. There was quite a large, well, there was the playground area. It's
Right.
been there, and if I might be mistaken, but I believe it's been shut down, fenced off for quite a while as well.
But the playground area would have been probably, I would say, a fairly sizable 40% of the original property. Was the original property Phase 1 and Phase 2? I guess it was.
Original property combined Phase 1 and Phase 2, that's correct.
Phase 2. And so
And a new road as well.
And the building would have occupied maybe, 25% of the property.
Portion of Phase 1.
Right. And so why did we not insist on, why did Parks not come back, given the fact that this is in the second lowest quintile of provisional parkland, why did Parks not come back and say, you need to set something aside?
It is, you're right, it is the second lowest quintile, and in terms of parks. The way I looked at it is that the Plunkett Park was right across the street, which is a sizable park that's got great capacity to service the area. And the amount of parkland that actually came through this development, through Section 42 of this development, given the low density of the development, was so small that it would have created a small pocket style park, which is not in the interest of parks to secure, given the amount of money that it takes to maintain a pocket style park versus even any larger park. There's no opportunity to expand the park because you couldn't put it in a corner of the lot where maybe neighboring properties would develop in the future.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I get that. Was there any park incorporated into Phase 1?
No.
No. So see, if we combined Phase 1 and Phase 2, we would have had maybe a half decent sized park.
That was considered, and it was still like a pocket sized park, about 700 square meters, if my memory serves me correctly.
And I noticed in the community consultations, people did raise the notion that we've lost some green space. That's one of the notes in the report. And were you at the community meeting?
I was not.
You're not. Okay. No. Anyway, those are just questions that reflect my opinion of the loss of green space. Because I know if this had occurred in my area, people would have been very upset about it. So thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, staff? Okay, no other questions. Councillor Mamalidi, it's your item.
Yeah, so listen, I echo Councillor Campbell's concerns. We've had this dialogue in the community, and it is an absolute shame that our policy takes cash in lieu money and brings it over to the much larger pot of money in the downtown or in City Hall, that the community isn't able to keep it. And in this particular case, there is a park right across the street, and there is a park right behind this subdivision. And my motion here is that City Council direct the standard parkland dedication fund collected under Section 42 of the Planning Act in respect of this application be targeted specifically towards Apted Park and Knights of Columbus Park, and that the ward council be consulted in this regard in 2019. So we're doing what we can with our own policy. If I were to move a motion to keep all of the money, it would die at council because it would break the policy. So I'm going to do what I can to upgrade the two parks beside it, and that's the best I can do. I'm not sure if you need a motion for me other than this one, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So
I guess I would move staff recommendations along with this.
So, all right, so we will vote on this first, Rosemary? Question of the mover? Okay, Councillor Holliday?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the Knights of Columbus Park. Could you just tell me where that is? Is it a city park?
Yeah, it's a city park. If you were to look at the map, you'd see this particular school that is now going to be a semi-detached development, which is very consistent, by the way, in the community. I wouldn't accept anything bigger than that. And right directly in front of this school, there's Plunkett Park. And then behind the school, about, I'd guess, 300 yards away or so, there's a park called the Knights of Columbus Park, both adjacent.
Okay, and it's just a city park. I just didn't know.
Two city parks. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So the only thing I can do is try and upgrade playgrounds or something like that with this money.
Okay, good. Any other questions? All right, there being no other questions, and we have, okay, speakers? 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 No? No other speakers? We can vote on Councillor Mamoulidi's amendment?
She got it right.
And then, yeah, on the amendment. And then staff recommendations. Yeah. All right, all in favor of Councillor Mamoulidi's amendment? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And now the item is amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, next item is item number 3216. Request for direction report 3541 to 6365 and 95 High Park Avenue and 66 and 102 to 116 Pacific Avenue. Official plan and zoning bylaw amendment and rental housing demolition application. We have one speaker listed for 3216, Lenka Hollabeck. Lenka? Hi, how are you? Come on up, and when you're ready, you've got 5 minutes. All set? Go. We're good.
Good afternoon again. This will be, I guess, even briefer than 5 minutes. In respect to this item, I am reminiscing on another request for direction report from December 2014, and it's this report is related to the development presently under construction at 51 Quebec Avenue. At that point in time, the City Council also directed the city solicitor to oppose the applicant's appeal since they deemed this proposal as overdevelopment. This overdevelopment is now taking place within High Park Apartment Neighborhood Character Study area, but it's outside of that secondary study because it was undertaken before the study took place. So under that scenario, the community got, instead of 31 stories, 2 buildings, they've got 2 25 stories buildings, and instead of 1,600 people, they are receiving about 1,000 more people. The same applies to natural heritage, which is about 90 meters south of this development. Under that scenario, there were no measures taken to mitigate this development. The hydrologic features were not part of natural heritage impact study, only formally, and there were no measures undertaken. So in this case, I am kind of, you know, a little bit leery whether I would support this unless I would know that the solicitor will be opposing this development on the full ground of provincial policy 2014 statement and will be implementing the existing policies to their full potential. If the solicitor is there to oppose development to get instead of 5,000 approximately new residents, 3,000 new residents, then we still are not implementing provincial policy statement policies. And as I mentioned before, we are gearing to end up somewhere at compromise that may fit well to the developers because they likely didn't start with what they intend to get, but it will compromise natural heritage, not to mention the community. So I would like to see if the city solicitor is to oppose this applicant's appeal, to oppose it on the ground of full implementation of existing policies. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions of the deputy? Thank you very much. Okay. Any other speakers? Any other deputies? We'll go to questions. Questions of staff? No? Then Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much. I will obviously be supporting the direction report here, sending city legal and anyone else we need, city planning, to oppose this development at the OMB, which is now the TLAP. LPAT. Yes, LPAT. And that's it. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, you're moving staff recommendations? All right, so moved by Councillor Doucette. All in favor of staff recommendations? Opposed? Carried. And next item, 17. So next item is 32.17, request for direction report 111 Pacific Avenue, 255 Glen Lake Avenue, and 66 Oakmount Road. And again, we have Lenka Hollebuck.
I want to avoid being repetitive. So what I said about the last item applies for this item as well. I just want to bring back something what the council said a little while ago, because when the solicitor will be dealing with this item in ALPAT, they will be talking about mitigation, etc. The councillor said that next week she would support the budget at PEC for management plan for High Park. I just want to stress that the management plan or best management practices is something what High Park should have for the past years, because the consultant has concluded in 2017 in the fall that there is a high level of impact along all major designated sensitivities. But in terms of adding 3,000 people potentially, management plan is a window dressing. It is something what designated park needs, period, under Toronto circumstances, but it's no substitute for making right planning decisions. It can only mitigate from here to there, and then what follows are very difficult political decisions, such as reviewing existing dogs off-leash designated area, which actually happens to be in designated area, and it's causing very high level of degradation. Options such as having no pets in the park whatsoever, which is part of our municipal code, 608.34, but very rarely used, as you are aware. There are options of having High Park as another Tommy Thompson Park, which means no pets, limited hours, but are these real options? Question mark. So again, I am coming back. We need right planning decision, and if the solicitor is there to oppose the appeal, that's his foundation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Any other speakers for item 3217, Pacific Avenue? No other speakers? Questions of staff? No questions of staff, then Councillor Doucette, it's yours.
Thank you very much. Once again, I will be supporting fully the directional report, which will be sending City Legal and Planning to LPAT. I do want to just emphasize something. Hyde Park does have a management plan. We are putting funding in to revise it. That's the difference. So it's not as if they're coming up with a management plan. They've had one for many, many years, but it is being revised due to the pressure we have now north of the park in the apartment neighborhood. So thank you.
All right, all in favor of staff recommendations as moved by Councillor Doucette? Opposed? Carried. So we need to do now is reopen item 3212.
Mr. Chairman, yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
All
So,
right, go ahead.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Apparently 3212, which we dealt with this morning, and I moved the staff recommendation, it was not on the green list for public deputations at 1:30, so we did move that. So I need to reopen and then see if there's anybody here to speak on it, and if not, just move the staff recommendation.
Okay, all in favor of reopening? Opposed? Carried. Any speakers on item 3212, 955 to 969 Weston Road? Okay, there being none, any questions to staff? No. And Councillor Mencia?
I'll move the staff recommendation again.
All in favor of staff recommendations? Opposed? Carried? All right, so next item is item number 3229, residential demolition, 2115 Bloor Street. And we have one speaker listed, Tonu Tosini. Good afternoon, sir. Yeah.
Point of order before you put the clock to go.
Yes.
This application in your list and the next one are adjoining properties. Both are for demolition permit applications.
You want to speak to both?
To both of them. I don't want to come up and repeat myself on the next agenda item.
No, absolutely. So you're speaking on both items 29 and 30, that'd be fine.
Yes, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Tanu Tassina. I live at 17 Harcroft Road, and I've lived there with my family for 34 years. I appeared before you in objection to both demolition permits for 2115 Bloor West and for 19 Harcroft Road. My property abuts both properties. These two properties are part of a larger redevelopment site consolidation at the corner of Harcroft and Bloor West. From Toronto Buildings' background report prepared for council, you will have read that part of this consolidation has been vacant since the 1980s. Indeed, the city granted in 1986 demolition permits for two residences on Harcroft Road and a strip of shops facing Bloor Street West. For some 30 years, these properties have sat vacant, a prime example of premature demolition. Also from Toronto Buildings report, you will have read that the Deputy Chief Building Official has received some 14 written letters of objection to the subject to demolition permit applications before you today. I've been copied by my neighbors on several of these objections, and the 14 objections represent over half of the residences comprising the Harcroft Road and Olympus Avenue neighborhood most directly affected by the corner redevelopment site. Who better to experience with living the presently vacant site and to know the impacts that would arise from the unwarranted additional demolition of these two residences. Staff in their report perhaps all too briefly summarized the objections as simply being about premature demolition of two residences, resulting in an unnecessarily large and unsightly vacant lot. Indeed, we do not want a larger lot sitting vacant for who knows how long, 10 years, 20, another 30 years? No, thank you. But more importantly, We, the neighbors on Harcroft Road and Olympus Avenue, do not want our residential neighborhood becoming ever more openly exposed, indeed potentially remaining indefinitely exposed, to the intrusive noise and bustle of Bloor Street that would result from the premature demolition of these two residences, which presently provide a buffer and transition from Bloor Street to the Harcroft Road and Olympus Avenue neighborhood. Staff in their report note that the city is in receipt of a site plan approval application, but staff did not acknowledge to you that this application was submitted 2 property owners ago. Indeed, nothing active as far as building something on the site is with the city for approval. Please, you are urged by my wife, myself, some of my neighbors, to not grant these 2 demolition applications. Premature demolitions, yes. Unwarranted demolitions, yes. Indeed, on a go-forward basis, your attention will be well focused examining, firstly, the city's missing action for vacant buildings, and secondly, the city's inadequate public notification requirements for demolition permit applications. For the first point, the City of Toronto could perhaps learn by example set by the City of Hamilton and its registry of vacant buildings. That city's registry-related annual fee could be a source for offsetting the expense of Toronto City's inspection of and enforcement activities related to vacant buildings. For the second point, and as regards the subject demolition applications, the notices for the subject applications were posted so as to be virtually invisible to passers-by. The posted notices for these 2 properties were about 8.5 by 14 inches. On one residence, the notice was posted 11 feet high and 56 feet from the sidewalk. And on the other, the notice was posted 8.5 feet high and 36.5 feet wide from the sidewalk. Even the zoom on my phone couldn't get into the application to read the details of the 11-foot notice. Consider directing staff to investigate these 2 policies areas, but today, please do not approve prematurely the subject to demolition permits. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the deputy? Yes, Councillor, go ahead.
So I understand your concern, and I have heard from quite a few residents. Once site plan is completed,
but there's none been submitted.
Once site plan is completed, if it gets completed, and a building permit is going to be, what's the word, given? Issued, that's the word, I'm sorry, it's been a long day. Residents would then be okay with the demolition of the 2 houses because then we know that something is actually going to be built. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, I have a sense that with the money put up front for building permits and site plan agreement and the work going through that there is some commitment by the builder to do something, but at the moment nothing has happened for decades. And
so residents are concerned that if these 2 houses came down now, before building permits, site plans approved, we could just have a bigger empty lot for the next 30 years.
Or a lot longer, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Campbell? Oh, sorry, you too, Justin?
The house next to you is vacant? Over here, the house next to you is vacant?
Yes.
Are there any raccoons in there?
I don't keep track on them, but the back window is not solidly closed. It's been ripped open, so the other house is more recently vacant.
Are you not concerned about, you know, animals and...
They visit my garbage bin anyway, whether the house is vacant or not.
Okay, I see. All right. How long has the house been vacant?
I think 2.5 years, might be 3 years now this spring.
Okay.
I'm trying to think when the doctor moved out and the 2 owners ago got possession.
At what point in time would it be acceptable to you to see the property demolished? Once there's an application?
No, once it's been approved.
Once the application has been approved?
Yes, because it could be filed and nothing happens. The site plan agreement has been now filed over 2 years.
I see. Got it. Okay.
Nothing happens.
Thank you.
Councillor Channel?
Yeah, thank you. So, I certainly agreed with one of your points that perhaps these houses act as a noise barrier.
I'm sorry? Jack?
That these homes act as a sound wall.
Yes.
So I get you on that. I'm not sure I buy into the notion that someone's paying big money for these sites, going through the process, and going to leave them vacant for 30 years. So let's just understand the condition of these homes. So one of them is vacant for 2.5 years. Is it derelict yet, or is it Are there raccoons living in it, all that
I
kind of
don't know
stuff?
who the tenants are, but I whacked the dandelion and blossoms earlier this spring off the lawn, so they didn't blow across. Maintenance isn't a high point.
Okay, so you're not concerned that these houses, if they stay, might start attracting animals and...
From the street, the view is fine.
Okay.
The sidewall that abuts my sidewalk to my door is fine. The weeds are unsightly, but looking from the street, one would not know that the building was empty. Rogers is going up to the door and knocking on the door to seeing who's in there if they want to upgrade their service, even yesterday.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Holliday?
Thanks. Sounds like a bit of a nuisance next to you. Have you had any conversations with the current owner about the state of the house and the weeds, as you mentioned, and the open window?
The ownership just changed within 6 weeks, 2 months, so I haven't seen anyone from the new owners. We had quite a detailed working group arrangement with 2 owners ago when it was Main and Main. So there was lots of discussion then with representatives, but Trinity Group, who owned it in the meantime, didn't make any contact either with me as the immediate neighbor or the rest of the neighborhood. When the same council approved the rezoning for the subject property a year and a half ago, there was note put in there that staff would work with the neighborhood to ensure privacy on the site plan, but that didn't come to bear as it changed ownership.
Has the conditions been generally okay up until now? You know, has it been...
Conditions regarding what?
No, just the property, the state of the property. You said it's been vacant for a number of years.
They changed the fencing of the originally vacant property from a board fence to one of these temporary chain link fences, and has fabric cloth on it that sort of stays fastened to the post, and because of how it's fastened to the ground, sometimes blows over. It's currently fastened now to the city's stop sign to keep it from blowing over.
But in terms of maintenance on the property, are the weeds somewhat cut? Is there accumulation of garbage? You know, all those sorts of things.
I haven't complained about either the house beside me or the 2115 behind me.
Okay, thank you.
So I haven't called 311 on that.
That's helpful, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor, more questions? No? Okay. Any other speakers on this item for 2115? Hi, come on forward.
My name is Matthew Lang from Trinity Developments.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
I can speak to and answer any questions from an ownership perspective regarding the application. So we closed on this property, well, the property as a whole, March 27th of this year. And as part of our process, we've taken over the application. Obviously, we picked up from where Main and Main had left it. We're working through the notice of approval conditions. We're working on our resubmission. And as part of our process and due diligence and wanting to put the property in the best position, we filed the demolition applications because the homes have been vacant. First home was vacant in 2016, and the second home has been vacant as of January 2018. The fencing is a bit of a mess, so we're really looking to clean up the site. We have a property manager in-house that deals with all of our properties. So we, as a part of our process and our go forward, we want to essentially clear the site, put in proper fencing, deal with things properly as we move forward, complete the NOAC, move on to building permit.
Okay. Any questions? All right, thank you, sir. Thank you. Any other speakers on this item? Okay, any questions to staff? Councillor Doucette? Have questions, staff?
Please.
Okay.
You may not need your whole binder. So, demolition. Demolition to me means they can take down a property. If there's any remuneration to be done on the land, they could excavate and put shoring up. Is that correct? Without coming back to us for any permission after demolition?
Through the chair, Councillor, I may not be the best person to speak to demolition permits. It might
So
be
my understanding is that a demolition permit allows them to demolish a building. If there's some contamination or if they decide to do some digging, they can do digging and get a shoring permit without coming back to us. So what I think residents are concerned about is that We could end up with a hole in the ground and then nothing actually gets built.
You could. Soil remediation is what I understand maybe you're thinking about.
Yeah.
That could be an independent, separate, standalone permit to do soil remediation. So if there's shoring involved, it would require a building permit, and that would not be subject to any kind of council discussions.
So that would not come back to this community council or to city council. So
That's correct.
we could end up, the residents could end up with no protection from the houses and possibly a hole in the ground.
Correct. So, you know, one of the things that I would have to consider, because it may be deemed to be a conditional permit at that point in time, would be the timing as well.
Yeah. Ms. Henstock, site plan. I understand the site plan is in. I understand it's not completed. Who put the site plan in then? Was it Main and Main, which were two owners ago, or is it the present owners who took possession on March 27th of this year?
Through the chair, I believe it was Main and Main.
Okay, so the site plan has been in for quite a while. Site plan generally takes, what, 9, 10 months from roughly, not a good question.
Our development guide says roughly about 9 months.
Okay, all right.
It does vary.
And then once site plan is complete, for them to actually get a building permit to actually start putting shovel in the ground, how much time is that usually?
Through the chair, it really depends on the developer, the builder. Once the site plan gets to notice of approval condition, we work with our colleagues in building. If they have building permits in, there's opportunities potentially for conditional building permits, depending on the situation. Once they reach final approval, then it's all up to the building division and the owner, and just how quickly they want to move forward. Some sites do remain vacant for a while afterwards, depending on their sales and when they want to construct construction. Other ones are quite keen and eager to go.
I'm trying to work out timing from what we've got before us now to when they may actually have permits to put a shovel in the ground.
Well, you'll have to consider that to demolish 2 vacant brick dwellings, you're talking...
A day?
Yeah, I was going to give them 2 weeks to
Okay.
clean up, but so it will disappear quickly. If community council wanted, they could make a condition of the demolition subject to it linked to some timing factor.
I'm not so concerned about how long it'll take them to demolish the houses. I'm concerned about how long that property could sit vacant before they actually build something.
That really is to how long it takes the owner to jump in.
But we still haven't completed site plan. We're still in the middle of that. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Holliday first. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a quick one. Is there any way that the owner of the site can erect a wall that would reduce the sound? So like a non-traditional fence, like a plywood fence or something a little taller. Do our municipal codes not allow for such a construction?
Sites have to be enclosed, and even on the plywood nature, that seems to be even above and beyond what our requirements are.
Yeah.
Anything beyond that is, I guess, that maybe the local ward councillor can convince the developer to do something.
Maybe the difference is, what is the difference between hoarding around a site, which could be constructed in a variety of ways, versus what our fence bylaw governs? And what I don't want to sort of suggest through my question is that maybe an enhanced fence be built that would block the sound and then run afoul of some other codes and rules. Is there any flexibility in that? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think putting plywood is going to change anything sound-wise. It's,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nunziata.
So the applicant is, when he made his deputation, is that he would do number 2, which would fence it off, maintain, and clean up debris, which is common, right? So normally when these applications come in, I had one in my ward this morning, is that it's not years before there's an application coming in, because why would someone want to demolish a building if the intent isn't there to rebuild? So that, normally, that's not the case, correct?
That would be correct. That's not normal.
Yeah.
My understanding from the neighbors who did email me in and write into me was the past history, because the site had two other buildings that had been demolished, and 30 years now have gone by, and nothing has happened. So it was like, why would you let two more buildings be demolished and not knowing on the timing?
But the other two buildings were from the same owner?
Not the current owner, so whoever.
So, exactly, so it's not the current owner?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, no other questions of staff? Then, Councillor Doucette, it's yours.
So I'm going to be moving item 1, which is actually, refusal of the demolition. And the reason I'm doing this is these houses can come down in a couple of days. So I don't think deferring the demolition until all the documents are in place, the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, is a big problem. What I'm hearing from residents, and I understand, they've been sitting looking at this vacant lot for over 30 years. Some owners have maintained it, some owners haven't. When we did have hoarding around it for several years, I was constantly calling in graffiti. So in some respects, the wire fencing is better, but the fabric is flapping in the wind and it does come down every now and then. I do believe the resident who spoke today, even though it's a vacant house and it's been vacant since 2018, it does give them a bit of a buffer. It does give them a buffer to what goes on Bloor Street. And once, as I say, the permits are in place and site plan is complete, I have no problem approving demolition then. I really don't. I wouldn't mind if they weeded the place right now, but on the other hand, it actually looks quite pretty with some of the natural flowers. Versus the ugly ground, which is uneven and has been left derelict for about 30 years. So that is where I am coming from. I do apologize to Trinity. I did try to reach you yesterday to tell you what I was doing. I know we have met, and I do believe that you will maintain this property as you've got it now, in a good condition until you get all your documentation in place. So
Well,
that is where
we have a question of the mover. Go ahead, Francis.
Yes, Councillor just said, as you know, I've been very supportive of the local councillor and support you on every issue. But on this particular issue, my question to you is, a few months ago, there was an application for a demolition permit on Dundas, just east of Jane Street, and you supported to fence it off, and I asked a similar question. To fence it off. So I'm just wondering that what makes this application different than the one on Dundas?
Actually, Councillor, I did deny the demolition permit on Dundas one as well, because it's also quite similar.
No, you didn't. We supported it. We supported it.
I denied
Just
the
ask
one
the
on...
question and get an answer.
Sorry, I denied the one on Dundas because it was a similar thing where I had learned that if they get a demolition permit, they could come and excavate, because they did find there was some contamination in the land, and therefore they could also do the shoring. That's why I learned all those processes can go after demolition.
All right, any other questions of the mover? Councillor Campbell? Councillor Campbell to speak? Go ahead.
Listen, you know what, I normally could care less about demolition permits, but I did notice Mr. Lang in the audience. I've had dealings with Mr. Lang. They're the owner of the Richview Square Plaza, and I know that if he says he will clean up the site and make it look right, then I know that he is a man of his word and he will do that. So I think in the interest of the overall neighborhood, that would probably be a better solution. I empathize with the homeowner, but there's going to be something built there in short order, so I will not support the refusal to demolish the site.
So you're supporting the local councillor? No. Or you're not? Okay. Let's be clear. Okay. So we have a motion to refuse the application to demolish. All in favor? I think that just passed. Opposed? Carried. Well, we voted on 29, but on 30 now, we have 30, which is 19 Harcroft. I just want to make sure that any other speakers on this other item? No? And did you want to speak, Councillor?
I'm
You wanna-
ditto, I'm moving the same motion.
Same motion?
Yes.
All in favor of, we're at 3230, all in favor of demolition? Opposed? Of denial of demolition, yeah, opposed, carried. All right, so the next item is 32.15, 3259, parking regulation amendments, Norby Crescent and Sun Road Drive. We have one speaker, Roberto Burton. Yep, come on up, sir. You have 5 minutes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon, Council. I am here on behalf of the Ward 4 Father Sierra Community Residents. There was a request from the principal of the school to have two adjacent streets, Norby Crescent and Sun Road Drive, opened up from no parking to allow a maximum of 10-minute window. Unfortunately, no community consultation was sought at that time by the principal. The counselor was brought in and asked for a brief report from the city staff, and it was put forward to you to have the no parking sections of those streets, which the local residents fought hard to delineate and to acquire many years ago. The impact from the traffic in the morning, and I am a local resident as well. I live on 24 Brook Tree Crescent, just around the corner from that. The negative impacts from adding more parking will just exasperate the problem. We are working very, very diligently with the school. I'm actually the co-chair, and also one of the Friday kiss and ride attendants to help alleviate that problem. So we're working within the school to manage that. So I have been in contact with the counselor, and he has reached out to the community and heard those voices. Unfortunately, we had not been able to connect. So the community had jotted down approximately 52 names over this very short weekend, just to voice their opinions that they would like the matter of the parking recommendation before you rejected, not deferred, and no parking signs be erected on Norby as they should have been, and they are currently lacking, as well as the component on Sunrow be refused. The petition I can leave with you. It has the majority, if not almost every single person of the age of majority signed from Norby Crescent, voicing that, as well as the homes adjacent to the impacted section on Sunrow. So I'd like to present that as required. But again, in speaking with the counselor, I think he's heard those voices and has the feeling that, part of our earlier conversation, we want to partner together to work to a better solution down the road and reject that. So that's what I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking to us. Are there any questions of the speaker today? Seeing none, I'll ask, are there any other speakers to this item? Thank you very much.
Do I leave this for presentation, or do I just keep? Sure, okay.
You can give that to the clerk, that would be great.
Thank you very much.
Are there questions of staff? Seeing none, Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, no, this.
Thank you.
So I know I have the rapt attention of the majority of council here, and this actually was a situation where I was working with Transportation Services to resolve a problem, and it turned out that it looked like we were going to exacerbate a problem. So I'm going to move just receipt of this information, receipt of the report, and we're not going to implement the 10-minute parking. I'd be happy to explain it to you, at length, but it's been a long day, and it's really not that interesting. So.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. On the motion to receive, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
Explain it to you later. It's really not that complicated.
That is carried.
So am I supporting you? Yes.
All right. Madam Clerk, just to confirm, we're going to 33 next?
Here, this is
Yeah, no, I got it. I just want to get the order right.
Yeah.
All right, EY 32.33 Boulevard Cafe permit application, 1312 St. Clair Avenue West, Nairn Avenue flankage, Ward 17. Do we have speakers for that item? It's 3233, which is the 1312 St. Clair Avenue Boulevard Cafe. Just going to switch to my speakers list here. That's what happens when you switch chairs twice.
It wasn't a deputation,
I don't believe we have speakers for this.
Yeah, it says Dustin Jones for this.
Yeah, no,
Oh, we're done. Okay. Seeing as there's no speakers, Councillor Palacio, that's yours. Do you have any questions of staff?
No, I don't. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did ask my questions to staff early this morning. I'm going to move that the application be approved. And one of the concerns from the Transportation Division, from the municipal licensing standards, is the accessibility aspect as it relates to the sidewalk. Now, as you can see in the drawings, there are some concrete boulders that were installed some time ago there because of the illegal parking. So I'll be asking the Transportation Division to remove those, and that will resolve the accessibility aspect that municipal licensing will concern with. Apart from that, you see a beautiful corner with a great flankage that can be used for a patio and location, and that will help to create something vibrant within that corner, and without impeding with pedestrian traffic, and that's something that the community would love to have. So that's what I'm moving, and I hope I can get support from members of council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor Palacio, did you move an item?
Yes, I did move that the application be approved.
So that's the alternate or different recommendations from the report. You're
That's
looking
correct.
to amend it.
And city staff, you have the recommendation then.
Thank you. I think it's on the screen. I want to have a recorded vote on that. I don't know if anyone else does, but all of those in favor, Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor Palacio, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Ciano, Councillor Campbell, all those opposed, Councillor Holiday.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, we're good, 7. Okay, the next one is EY 32.69. We'll go to the pink sheets. Reducing the speed limit on certain streets in Ward 12 to 30 kilometers an hour. Councillor DeGiorgio. Questions of staff?
No, I have no questions of staff. These are just in keeping with the community safety zones. These are streets that have schools on them that my staff have asked me to move based on communications I've received, so.
Okay, are there any other questions of staff? I have one, if I may. Questions of staff? It's the item 32.69.
Actually, wait a minute, one.
And my question is really simple. Did staff support any of the recommended speed changes? Or have you not had an opportunity to report on them?
We haven't had an opportunity to report on these locations, so I wouldn't know whether there is an issue or concern in the community regarding speeding.
Okay, thank you very much. I may ask another similar question to that soon, but I'll forgive you, or beg your forgiveness for up and down here. Okay, is there anyone wishing to speak on the matter? Otherwise, sorry, Councillor DeGiorgio, that's yours.
Yeah,
Well-
I'll speak. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief. I mean, we're talking about my next motion, for example, asks for a number 70 asks for a pole on speed humps on Bicknell Avenue. Bicknell Avenue has a school on the street. Yeah, I'm speaking on 69, asking that the speed limits be reduced on those streets because the majority of them have schools on them.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell?
Oh, there's a lot of schools in Toronto. We could make I didn't come down here to make friends. You know, I think this is ridiculous, and I'm not going to support it. Just as I said with respect to Councillor Doucette's and Councillor Nunziata's, it's an election year, and that's what we're doing. And we just, it has everything to do with the election. It has
Councillor
everything to
Campbell?
do. All right, anyway, I've had my,
Temper
I have
the
a floor.
comments.
No, I appreciate it. You can vote against it, but the policy is that we're introducing community safety zones in around schools. And I'm saying, you know what? If you want to leave it to community safety zones, that's fine. In the meantime, I thought I would preempt.
Thank you. The motion's in order. It's before us. I think it's time for a vote. All of those, does anyone want it recorded? No. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Off to EY 32.70. Speed humps on Bicknell Avenue from Rogers Road to Eglinton Avenue West. Are there any questions of staff on this matter? Seeing none. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Just asking for a poll to be done on Bicknell because it has a Keelsdale Elementary Public School about midway between Rogers and Eglinton.
Any other speakers on the item? Seeing none. All of those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. 33.72. Councillor Palacio. This is...
I'll go.
Polling for speed humps, Silverthorne Avenue
Whose
between...
item is it at 7 o'clock tonight?
Yep.
Oh.
All right. Polling for speed humps, Silverthorne Avenue between Pryor Avenue and Roundtree Avenue. Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none. Councillor Palacio.
Whose item is tonight?
This is yours.
Oh,
Luciano.
I'll be here.
All right. Silverthorne Avenue.
Just move it.
Yes, I'm moving my recommendations, and I'm not even going to get into it. That's what the community wants, and that's exactly what I support. It has nothing to do with an election year. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
in favor?
So everyone see the motion on the screen, and this is different than the recommendation, I believe, that Councillor Palazzo had originally put forward.
Yeah, but we allowed us to waive these requirements now, so let's vote.
All right.
It's legit.
Any desire for recorded vote? No. All those in favor? Those opposed? That carries.
Oh, come on, the blue.
All right. EY 32.73. We just got a couple left here. EY 32.73. Polling for speed humps, Blackthorn Avenue between Roundtree Avenue and Rogers Road. Are there any questions of staff?
No, Mr. Chairman. I have a motion before us.
To speak, Councillor Palacio. You've got a motion
Thank you, Mr.
there?
Chairman. I have an elementary school next to it, and that's what the residents want, and that's what the parents want, and that's what the children deserve in the community. So I'm doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Palacio. Anyone else to speak? Seeing none. All of those in favor?
All those absolutely in favor?
And that is with the amendment. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. 32.74, polling for speed humps, Uxbridge Avenue between Pelham Avenue and Davenport Road. Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none. Councillor Palacio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I do have an elementary school, the only French immersion school that I have there, and that's a request of the parent council, and I would like to your support on this, yes.
The amendment's on the screen to waive the polling. All of those in favor? All of those opposed? And that carries. EY 32.75, installation of speed humps on Pelham Avenue between Uxbridge Avenue and Lawton Avenue. Any questions of staff on this item? Seeing none. Councillor Palacio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to move the same as before. This is an adjacent street next to an elementary school as well.
So just for clarity in the clerk, this one already contains a waiving clause. Are we amending that, or are we just going with the recommendations? All right, so all those in favor of the recommendation on the pink sheet?
Oh, come on.
Okay, Councillor Campbell. Question of staff.
Is it, we've just approved speed humps for, something like 5 different locations. Is that in the budget for 2018? I mean, do we have, these speed humps are, $50,000, $60,000, a shot when we put them in? Is this in the?
Depends on how
You put in a whole bunch of them, it adds up.
On average, taking into consideration the physical device itself, typically it's about 3,000. All the other stuff is another $1,000 or per.
So it could be 18, times
Yeah.
6, it's 18,000 a road, so.
But we do have found some additional funding to be able to release another contract this year for traffic calming, and this would go into that list.
This is
No, we're
not
not.
polling. This is not polling, this is waiving the polling and putting them in.
This is installation.
So, okay, you know what, there's no point in, I'm wasting my breath. Yeah, great, that does a lot. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Palazzo, do you want to move your motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move the motion, including waiving the provisions for the polling as well.
Thank you very much. The motion's before us. All those in favor? Any opposed? 32.75 carries. 32.77.
Well, we've already done those earlier.
No, we need
Well,
77.
which ones are left? Because we did some of them.
77
We have
we need to do.
77, 87, 88.
I don't have 87.
Yeah, he's got it under control.
All right. 3277, request for pedestrian crossover at the intersection of Rogers Road and Boone Avenue. Are there any questions of staff? I have one.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Naz. I just wanted to know if staff have studied or reviewed or endorsed the recommendations in any way.
Actually, we have studied this particular location. It didn't meet the warrants for a PXO at this location, and we advised the councillor of that.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none. Councillor Palazzo, the floor is yours to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of the warrants, the same thing we have at the intersection of Rogers and Chambers, which is 2 blocks away from there, 2 elementary schools. At this location, we have elementary schools very close by as well. And when it comes to incidents or accidents, especially when it relates to seniors and children, I'm all for health and safety. So that's a humble request, city staff to look into it, and hopefully that's going to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. All of those in favor of the motion before us? I only see 3 hands.
I'm here.
Nice try.
I'm here.
I see. Let's just try that again. Let's, do I need to record it? Councillor DeGiorgio in favor. Councillor Palazzo. Councillor Nunziata. Councillor DeCiano, that's 4. Any opposed? Councillor Doucette, Holiday, and Campbell. That passes. Madam Clerk, may I just get some confirmation on the next number here? 86. You know what? Do you have a copy? Because my papers are out of order. Sorry about that. Thank you. All right. EY 3286. That's from Councillor Mammoliti.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could on this one, because this.
Questions of staff?
No, I'd like to move it because this motion actually is part of Councillor Mammoliti's ward and my ward, and we work together on this. This is an application for a liquor license, which is technically in Councillor Mammoliti's ward, and we have some serious issues on this liquor license application. They've also filed for a noise exemption, and we've informed MLS that we have issues with that. So I move the recommendation from Councillor Mammoliti.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. All those in favor?
Yeah, I moved it.
Can I get a recorded vote, please?
Did you want
You
to
bet.
speak on it?
Yeah, I do.
All right, you just made it in time. Councillor Mammoliti,
I
on
thought
item,
you left.
No, sometimes you gotta have meetings in the back. I'm really sorry.
your item 3286, 7th Annual Reggae Exclusive at 1677 Wilson Avenue West. Go ahead.
So I need to just say this. This site has been an ongoing problem with a lot of things. It just seems that every time they have one of these festivals or we give them permission to do anything. There's either a stabbing or something happens. The community does not want any noise, doesn't want us to grant any noise exemptions or liquor licenses for these kinds of festivals. And I think Councillor Nunziata is hearing the same thing in her part of the ward.
Because mine's the other side, my ward is the other side, south of the
Okay.
So I think I needed to say that, and I'd like Community Council to support us not giving, or recommending that we don't give a liquor license to.
Okay. Recorded vote on the item. Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor Doucette, Councillor Palazzo, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Holiday, Councillor DiCiano, Councillor Mamalidi, and Councillor Campbell. That passes unanimous. EY 32.87 regarding proposed amendments to Chapter 918 parking on residential front yards and boulevards for Ward 11. Are there any questions of staff on this item?
And
Seeing
Mr.
none,
Chair,
Councillor
yes, I'll
Nunziata.
move the recommendation, and staff has assisted me in our legal department on drafting this motion. Thank you.
I'm going to request a recorded vote on that.
Recorded vote.
Councillor Doucette, can I record the vote? You got to read quick. Councillor DeGiorgio is in favor. Councillor Palazzo is in favor. Councillor Nunziata is in favor.
Sorry.
Parking pads.
Yep.
Councillor DiCiano is in favor. Councillor Mamalidi is in favor. Councillor Doucette, is that a yay or a nay?
Okay, whatever. Okay.
Is that a yes? I got to record one or the other.
No, the ones that have parking pads.
So it's not illegal
Yes.
parking pads, you're legalizing them
Yeah.
just straight off the bat?
Yeah.
And no, so I
Yeah.
can't support it.
Okay.
Councillor Doucette's a no and Councillor Holiday's a no, and stay tuned for council on that one.
All right.
EY 32.88, I believe this is our last item, Madam Clerk. Yes, I'm getting the yes. This is from Councillor DiCiano. The recommendation is Etobicoke York Community Council rescind the existing parking prohibition in effect at all times on the east side of Dayton Avenue between the first laneway south of the Queensway and St. Clair West. Any questions of staff? To speak on the item, Councillor DiCiano.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping that Community Council can support the motion. We have a parking situation in that area. There's lots of restaurants that are looking for some assistance with parking, and Dayton Avenue is a logical choice. So I'm hoping everyone can support this. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. All right. Councillor DeGiorgio, you have a motion to introduce and enact certain bills.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That the Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as bylaws bills 853 to 867, 935, 969 to 972, and 982 to 983, prepared for the July 4th, 2018 meeting 32 of the Community Council.
Shall these bills be passed and declared as bylaws? All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Councillor Doucette, you have a motion to introduce and enact a confirming bill.
That the Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm, lots of confirmings, the legislative proceedings of Etobicoke York Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting 32 on July 4th, 2018.
Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Just a quick check for tonight. Who's in attendance? Councillor Jojo, Doucette, Councillor Palazzo, you're in for tonight? Great. Councillor Nunziata, Councillor DiCiano, everyone's in for tonight. Excellent. Thank you very much.
I'm not. No, sorry.
Thank you.
I can't be.
We are in recess, correct?
So we only introduced up to two.
goddamn right they will. That's one of the